The Ministry of Justice will today publish new guidelines that will see drug possession and shoplifting offenders let off with cautions. It's part of an attempt to ease the record backlog in the courts.
And we'll bring you your latest weather forecast.
Heavy rain and strong winds. It's not looking very summer-like today. Is there any improvements on the horizon? I'll have the full forecast coming up.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Shall we kick off just a little bit about what we need to do to save the country and save the planet?
Yes, let's. I think that's a really good place to start.
Because there's, all the green agenda, and everyone's very concerned. How do we save the world, basically? We've got the answer for you, haven't we, courtesy of the Daily Star?
We do, yes, and that is to eat fish or die.
Pub.
Oh, yeah. Or die.
At the pub.
At the pub.
Yeah, so you need a pint of lager and fish and chips at the pub, and the world's healed, apparently.
Yeah, and I'd be up for that, to be honest.
Yeah, so apparently humankind is going to go extinct because we don't eat enough fish. So we need to eat more fish. And it also says drinkers are going soft at the pub, so we're damaging the pubs because we're just having soft drinks rather than a pint or a glass of wine.
See,
whatever.
I'm doing neither of those things. I eat so much seafood. I'm probably eating enough to keep the whole of humankind going for a long time.
And you do, in fact, drink like a fish.
And I do drink like a fish. You're not wrong. So I'm doing the right thing. But are you?
Yes.
Are you?
No.
You're not?
No, because I don't...
Oh, you're veggie and you don't drink?
I don't eat fish.
You're letting us down.
I'm sorry. I am leading to the extinction of humankind. Wow. I can only apologise. But, yeah, so that's where we're going wrong. Apparently. Just so you know, according to the Daily Star this morning.
Why do we have to eat fish, then? I mean, I know it's good for us.
Because we're not getting enough omega-3 fatty acids, and so, which is, so we're damaging our brains.
Oh, and apparently it doesn't help. The consequence is mental ill health and diminishing IQ. Well, if that isn't enough to persuade you to get a fish and chip supper, I don't know what is.
Oh,
get yourself a cod and chips tonight.
Oh.
I'd say.
I think I need a new... I'll get a new chair in a minute as well, because we've got an issue with squeaky chairs.
We do.
So we do need... We do need to sort that out, so I won't be able to move for the next 5 minutes, but apart from that, we're all right. Let's take you through our top story this morning, then. And Donald Trump has been charged over attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Yes, the 4 counts include conspiracy to defraud the US and witness tampering, and follows an inquiry into those January the 6th riots.
Well, the indictment comes from Special Counsel Jack Smith, who said the uprising, which saw the storming of the US Capitol building, was an unprecedented assault on democracy.
Well, in a statement, the Trump campaign said the charges were ridiculous and accused President Biden of election interference. OK, let's talk to political commentator Scotty Nell Hughes, who joins us now from across the pond. Good to see you this morning. Look, I mean, part of the issue with this is they've taken evidence from people like the former Vice President, Mike Pence, who seems to have really added to the case against Trump in all of this, doesn't he? I mean, has he got anywhere to hide from these accusations?
Good morning. And it's not only the former president the vice president is talking against, it's his now opponent in the 2024 election. But listen, all of this is complete rubbish, a word that both across the pond and here in the South we say quite often, because let's talk about what this is all about. This is to try to make sure that Donald Trump can not only not run for president, but he can't be on the ballot, and gosh forbid he gets elected again, he can't actually put into office. They tried this. This is another desperate political attempt. They tried this when he was still in office. They impeached him, failed. They tried him when he got out of office, when they did this circus of a January 6th hearing, which nobody paid attention to. And we've seen time and time again, court case after court case, go against Donald Trump. And with each time that they put something against him, all it does is make the American people just turn a blind eye and realize this is just more drama trying to be interjected in the election process. And they really have other things more important to be worried about than necessarily the political games that continue in Washington, D.C.
Donald Trump is already charged with 2 other cases, though, isn't he? The mishandling of classified files and falsifying business records to cover up those hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. But what do you make of these charges? They do seem very serious, don't they?
Well, honestly, I think that Georgia probably has the most gravitas within the case. And yet here, a year after we pretty much started talking about these charges being filed against Donald Trump, this is when they choose to introduce it. All this is doing is confirming that, once again, the DOJ here in the United States is just a tool, a weapon being used against political opponents. And in this case, it happens to be against the person currently in the executive office, using our DOJ to go after his now obviously known political opponent. And when you talk about people like Vice President Mike Pence, you got to put it in perspective. These are not people that are just, that were a part of Republicans. These are people that are now running against Donald Trump. So while I agree that Georgia, there is some circumstances that probably do need to be addressed within it. They've used a year and they've gone through all these other court cases that just weakens the public attention, the public fan, when it comes to actually talking about any of the cases going against Donald Trump, and just further proves the point that this is just being used to try to take him off the ballot and interfere in an election, which is what the Trump campaign is accusing the Biden administration of doing in their latest press release.
Yeah, but come on, Scotty. When you look at this, I mean, these are very serious allegations, a lot of them being that the claims Trump made about election interference were knowingly false. And look, this is the dossier, right? There's masses of it, including the fact that the Attorney General said that in Michigan there'd been no fiddling with the vote, but the next day Trump said that this is corrupt, Detroit is corrupt, they know it, Detroit is totally corrupt. I mean, he'd been told that wasn't the case, right, by his officials. There's loads of stuff here indicating that he knew what he was saying was absolute rubbish, and he went ahead and said it anyway.
Two points to what you're saying. What that dossier that you're holding in your hands right now, how far are we since the election? I mean, we're talking, they're accusing him of instigating January 6th. It is not illegal to question the results of an election, especially weeks after. It is not illegal in any of our laws here in the United States that you can't question. Now, what is illegal is encouraging people to become violent with it, which President Trump time and time again publicly accused people to keep the peace, to not storm the Capitol. But that seems to be completely ignored by the mainstream media. And now, as we're continuing to find more and more out about January 6th and what was actually involved in the crowd, people are questioning anything that's coming about. But to your point about, sure, that dossier right now, but guess what? In the past, dossiers haven't turned out to be completely true either. And no one's ever been held accountable for the dossier that took down the Trump administration and plagued him for 4 years when he was in office. I imagine it's probably going to be 2 years later when we find out what is true and what is false in the dossier, those documents you're holding in your hands right now.
Yeah, but hold on. You say Donald Trump repeatedly, told the people they had to keep the peace. What he said was, we fight like hell. This is on January the 6th at that rally. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. I mean, look, that's how...
Do you also want to repeat the tweet that he pointed out? Like, do not storm the Capitol, keep the peace, do not question law enforcement. Do you want to also read those tweets that came directly from Donald Trump at the same time that they were saying he was instigating it? He was actually telling people to stand down, back away from the Capitol, return back to your home. Those are the tweets that conveniently are left up. Never did Donald Trump say to storm the Capitol as they accused him of doing. And once again, this is 2 years ago. If he actually would have done that, I guarantee there would have been a conviction by now. But that's why this continues to look very, very curious.
Because unfortunately, there's no hard evidence that they can actually nail him on. So they have to keep this up until they can take him off the ballot.
And Scotty, what does this mean for Trump and the 2024 Trump campaign?
Oh, right, I think we've lost connection to Scotty Nell Hughes. Yeah. Never mind. We got the gist of what she was saying. It's all rubbish, she says. All nonsense. But of course, the accusations are, the charges now against Trump are that he did try to interfere the results of that election. and that he tried to persuade Mike Pence to do something which wasn't correct, which was to officially overturn those results, so he sort of had the power to do, not to verify those results.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have to wait and see what happens in court, how quickly this could all happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, he's going to appear in court in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, so we can expect the sorts of scenes that we see when Trump is around. I'm sure we're going to see lots of his supporters out there in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. And from the statement that we've seen from the Trump campaign, they say that the timing of this is deliberate to coincide with his winning 2024 campaign.
I tell you what has always concerned me about this whole thing was that 6 months or more before the election, Donald Trump said if he didn't win, it would be because of vote rigging. That was before anyone had cast a ballot. If I don't win, it's because it's been rigged. And, of course, he didn't win, so he said, well, it was rigged. Now, I don't know. Do you think? I mean, it's a questionable thing to say, to be perfectly honest, but then he says lots of questionable things. Does that mean he's guilty of anything criminal? Well, Scotty Nell Hughes says no. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com.
Now, the Prime Minister has vowed to stop housing illegal migrants in hotels as the Home Office hints that asylum seekers won't be moved onto a barge off the coast of Dorset until next week.
Well, talking to our economics editor, Liam Halligan, the Prime Minister said the current system of migrant housing is not fair.
What's going on currently is completely wrong. We've got a situation which is unfair. British taxpayers are forking out £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in hotels and other accommodation. That's clearly wrong, it's clearly unfair, and that's why I want to put an end to it. Now, in the short term, we're finding alternative sites like the barges that we're bringing in, which are new ways to deal with this problem, which no one else has done, but I've done. But fundamentally, if we want to stop this, we've got to stop people coming here in the first place, and that's why stopping the boats is one of my 5 priorities. That's why we've passed the toughest law that any government has ever passed, which will help us do that.
Well, let's get more now from the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Good morning to you, Tom. Really good to have you with us. I think most people would agree, wouldn't they, that it's not sustainable to be spending £6 million a day on migrant hotels. But the fact is, no flights have taken off to Rwanda. We can't even get 50 people onto a barge. So, in the meantime, that's what we've got to do, right?
Well, I think what's striking is that even if we're talking about in terms of housing migrants on barges, or we're talking about putting them on RAF basis, as is going to happen at 3 sites across the country, that's already a sign of failure. It's a sign of failure that they haven't been able to get a grip on this problem. They're having to resort to increasingly blunt instruments to both house migrants, but also as a kind of rough sort of deterrent. And it's all downstream from the fact that they can't get a handle on processing migrants in the applications in a quick fashion, but also in terms of actually just sealing the border, if you like, as they want to do. And they can't even achieve this failure of a policy, if you see what I mean. We've gotten to the point where the Bibi Stockholm has become a running farce. First, it was these fire safety issues which were stopping it from taking place. There has also, in the last 24 hours, been some reporting of legal challenges on behalf of some of the individuals who have already been sent there. So that sense of the government just not having a grip on this is still there. And I think it's just worth remembering that, again, when we're talking about barges or we're talking about RAF bases, that's already a sign of failure. So they're just piling one failure on top of the other.
Look, it's very easy to look at this and say the government hasn't got a grip on it, and that may well be true. But do we need to look at the fact that, as you say, some of the issues with the Bibi Stockholm, legal challenges now being launched, a lot of the stuff with... it's been used for this sort of thing previously, and now the FBU, the Fire Brigades Union, is saying, oh, we're going to launch a campaign because we're not happy about the width of the corridors and things like that, which seem to be a stalling tactic, right? On top of that, the processing, even if it happened within a week, we've still got a difficulty getting people back off our shores again, haven't we, actually getting them out there. So it's not actually all the government's fault, is it?
Well, that's been one of the big issues that has bedevilled the whole migration policy issue for so long, which is the fact that there are people who want to just throw legal hurdles in the way, who want to exploit judicial review, who want to exploit various different legal challenges in order to stop what is effectively the democratically elected government of the day trying to implement its policy. And regardless of where you stand on the migration issue, I think it's important that a government can say what it's going to do and implement it without it meeting any of those problems. I think the issue is that the government has also been able to hide behind some of those issues. They've been able to say, this is not our fault because of these lefty lawyers and so on. There's truth in that, but it has also stopped them from doing what is necessary, I suppose, to get a grip on this issue. And it is worth remembering that if Rishi Sunak's headline claim is that he wants to make sure that the 50,000 people in hotels currently costing millions of pounds a day to the taxpayer are cleared out. Even if the Bibby Stockholm was filled up to its extra capacity of 500 plus, even if all of these different RAF bases were, again, met capacity, which is only really a few thousand each, I believe, that's barely going to make a dent in the amount of people who are in the hotel system. So I feel like so much of this is about optics, really, and he's failing to even pull that off at this point.
And this against the backdrop of those 5 pledges, the main one, many would say, is to stop the boats. And we know that this is a top election issue for many, many people. So he hasn't got long, really, to start making some headway on this.
He doesn't. And whilst earlier on in the year, it felt like particularly with the return scheme with Albania, which brought down those numbers to a very significant degree, it's not looking as if much progress is being made. We wait to see if it's as bad as last year with the record 45,000 people making it over the channel. And I think what's worth remembering about this is obviously it's become an electoral issue. People are concerned about borders and control. No one can support the current situation where you've got people feeling compelled to make very perilous journeys in order to get here because there is that particular issue. That's not a system anyone can support. But at the same time, I think it's also worth remembering that no one really benefits from the system as it currently is. It doesn't benefit the migrants who are often left in limbo for long periods of time. It doesn't benefit the communities like Portland, which is amongst the 10% most deprived areas in the country, and yet it has this kind of issue imposed on them, which of course is something which is leading to a lot of friction and protest. No one comes out well.
But in terms of it being a political issue, what we don't have is any party who seems to have a viable way of actually, despite what they say, of actually saying, yeah, we can sort this system out.
No, I mean, that has always been the issue. I mean, on the one hand, you think it surely cannot be on the wit of man to come up with a system which is, on the one hand, humane, which on the one hand can deal with what we might consider to be legitimate asylum claims, but also not have to resort to increasingly blunt tactics. But on the kind of Labour side, you've got them just saying, well, we do this differently, it's a mess. Which doesn't seem to amount to very much. And then maybe to the right of the Conservative Party, you have just talk of kind of maybe increasingly kind of brute force measures, which I don't think the public would be happy with either. So it has been an ongoing problem, but you do just come back to that situation of surely it's not beyond the wit of any government to come up with some sort of solution to this with all of those impediments that we've talked about, if they could finally overcome some of those.
Well, we shall see. Tom, thank you very much indeed. If you've got any bright ideas how to deal with it, gbviews@gbnews.com. I mean, the big issue is the processing. If you could get that sped up, then you would deal with a lot of the problem. Not all of it, but a lot of it. But we don't seem to be capable of doing that. I don't know why. If you do, if you work in the system, let us know what you think.
Yeah, we do love to hear from you. So do get in touch with your views on that story or any of the stories that we are talking about today. OK, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Ministry of Justice set to release a draft code of practice looking at how police should respond to low-level first-time offenders. The new government guidance could see shoplifters, thieves and those in possession of drugs let off from being sent to court if it's a first offence.
The UK energy industry leaders are set to gather at Downing Street today to discuss energy security and economic growth with Grant Shapps. Mr Shapps says the summit will focus on sending a message loud and clear to the likes of Putin that we will never again be held to ransom with energy supply.
And the use of AI in breast cancer screenings is safe and could halve the workload of radiologists. That's according to a study. Researchers found that computer-aided detection could spot cancer in mammograms at a similar rate to radiologists.
You like cooking, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I like
You're very good at it.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm all right.
He's being humble. He's being humble. He's very good. Your favourite kitchen gadget? The must-have in your kitchen?
Blender.
Blender? Why?
Because it just saves a whole load of hassle, doesn't it? Well, I've got a stick blender thing.
Oh, right, and you like that for your soups and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a nice soup yesterday, didn't you? You did.
I tell you too much, I regret it.
Very across things. Well, apparently, the newest must-have kitchen appliance is a pantry.
Oh, a pantry?
Yeah.
Right.
Which is apparently seeing a revival.
But then how do you build one if you haven't got one
Well,
already?
you've got to have a big house, haven't you? You've got to...
We used to have a pantry.
Did you?
Back in the house I grew up in, it's an old farmhouse.
See, this is what I'm talking about.
And so there was a proper pantry and it was great.
Was it?
It's now a bathroom.
See, I think you'd have to knock out a bathroom to create a pantry, wouldn't you? If you don't already have one.
I like the pantry. So just, you know, just keep all the food in the pantry.
Well, apparently 21% of people insist it's the most desirable feature of a kitchen today, and they want it over an air fryer or a coffee machine.
Yeah.
See, I'm not sure about that. I love my air fryer. That's what I rely on the most.
It's all about space, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all about space.
Space.
You've got to have space for a pantry, and it needs to be cold as well.
Yeah.
So sort of no insulation on it.
Well, they're apparently seeing a revival. A pantry. Do get in touch. What's your favourite kitchen gadget? Do you have a pantry? Do you love it? I'm sure you do if you've got it.
Send us a picture of your pantry, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, for many students, graduation day is meant to be a moment of relief and celebration.
Relief.
It is relief when it's all
awesome.
over. However, the reality for young adults this year is very different.
Yeah, ongoing marking boycotts and lecturer strikes have meant that students will have to graduate without actually getting their final degree classification. So you get your degree, is it a first, is it a 2-1, is it a 2-2? Anyway, that could cause a lot of problems for these postgraduates trying to get a job because they don't know what level of degree they've got.
Well, GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster has the story.
Graduating should be a milestone moment, but this summer it's different. It's estimated that around a third of the 500,000 undergraduate students finishing university this year are leaving without their final degree because of a marking boycott by lecturers.
I was there present at the ceremony, but I did not receive my degree, so I didn't receive a certificate.
Although I have my graduation, I'm still left on a preliminary grade with part of my course being unmarked.
We never received a grade. So when we had the whole celebration, but you had no idea, I had no idea what I got.
There was no actual certificate or anything, just was a bit of a weird feeling.
At 145 universities, university and college union lecturers have been striking and not marking work since April, in a dispute with university bosses.
We're striking for better pay, we're striking for better working conditions. We are overworked, burnt out.
I love this job and I love my students. We're just asking for basic dignity here.
Students are paying a heavy price.
As I stand here with 4 years of work behind me, I do not hold a degree in my hand. Instead, I hold an apology letter filled with platitudes and a list of courses with the letters TBC.
Many don't know when or if all their work will eventually be marked and when they'll get their final degree.
And a list of courses with the letters TBC instead of a mark next to them.
You don't know where this leaves us in terms of applying for jobs. For friends and experiences of my peers, you know, they've had master's offers withdrawn, they've had visa applications unsuccessful. So it's really quite a stressful and unnerving time.
Students have largely sided with their lecturers and have given the university management a rough ride.
To the management of this university, shame on you for not acting appropriately.
And in Westminster, there's concern too. Here's the chair of the Education Select Committee, Robin Walker.
It's deeply unfair for those students, because of a strike, to be denied the opportunity to get the proper marks that they've earned. What we've seen is a very variable performance by universities in sorting this out. They're all being funded by the taxpayer. They're all having the students taking on substantial debt in order to get their degrees, and it's not right.
So, do students feel they've got value for money?
Absolutely not. Just a joke that you work so hard after 4 years and you can't even, celebrate properly and go through that milestone achievement of getting a grade.
We paid for what we thought we were going to get and they didn't deliver on that.
I'm walking away from university with nothing in my hands, end up to £50,000 in debt.
Good morning, support your striking staff.
The union and employers have been talking again in recent days, but there's no breakthrough as yet, and it will come too late for this year's graduates. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, let's speak to former undergraduate at the Royal Holloway University in London, Max Harrison. Max, good to see you this morning. And look, frankly, this is an absolute disgrace, isn't it? 50 grand or thereabouts of student debt, all the work you put in, and no one can be bothered to mark your courses.
No, I mean, you're spot on, and good morning to you both. I mean, it's just another clear instance of lecturers playing God with students' lives. You know, we're looking at a situation wherein now 13,000 students are having their results disrupted by this somewhat selfish strike. And it looks like there's going to be no end of this nonsense for students going forward. So it is incredibly sad to see the situation that's going on. And one can only hope that sooner rather than later, it can all be resolved and that students can live their lives normally and get the results that they deserve.
And Max, what's your situation? Are you still studying now? How have your lectures been going, if they've been going at all? And has your coursework been marked?
So on my postgraduate, I've been quite lucky not to have been affected by these strikes, but I do know that the university has affected the undergraduate programs at my university, which I'm doing for sports law. But I do know a large collective of students who won't be getting their results this summer. And if we look at what's happening now with these universities, I mean, Manchester University gave a £500 compensation to their students. It's actually quite laughable. You know, we should be looking at a situation wherein students are getting most of their year, the fees cut off or compensated. You know, they are stuck in Zoom lessons the entire year. It's not worth the money which it's costing. And if we look at the situation now, interest on tuition fees are going up anyway. So it's awfully sad to see what's going on. And I think I'm one of the rare lucky ones, I think.
Well, what I'm intrigued by, Max, is that you're blaming the lecturers here. I mean, they've gone on strike, so they're not marking the coursework. What we saw in our report there was at least one person who was giving a speech at their graduation actually not blaming the lecturers, but blaming the university management because they're clearly thinking the lecturers aren't being paid their due.
I guess it's all about sort of how you market this thing. You know, they're claiming that their conditions are poor. I've been to 3 universities of a broad range of, let's say, levels in this country. I've always thought that these are above standard, standards which are acceptable for people in the real world, not this small academic bubble. And if we also look at the situation, you know, the average lecturer in this country is earning £49,000. You know, especially through a cost of living crisis, that is considerably better than the average person and the average Joe in the UK. So it's very hard to find sympathy when actually, you know, 56% of all UCU members voted against a pay increase of 5 to 8%. So this is very clear that they are weaponising and trying to destroy, arguably, students' lives so that they can get more pennies and pounds in their pockets. It's quite sick, actually.
OK. Max Harrison, really good to have you on the programme this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
I mean, I'd be just livid if I was a student doing that, because you need to know what you've got. The fact no one's even bothered to look at your coursework. They'd be punishing you if you didn't get it in on the deadline, but then no one's marking it.
No, you're completely... That's a really good point. Really, really good point. And it's these students I feel so sorry for. I mean, so many of them didn't sit their A-levels, couldn't sit their A-levels because they did it during the pandemic. They were just given an estimated grade. That's how they got to university. And now they're there. They can't even get their work marked. Feels like they've absolutely been done over for years.
Yeah.
I really, really feel for this student community at the moment. Really, really difficult.
Just isn't right. Anyway, let us know what you think about that. In the meantime, should we see what the weather's going to do for you today? I don't think it's going to be very nice. Here's Aidan.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear. Some clear spells, however, it's a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday. Thursday begins with some sunshine, particularly for northern and western England as well as Wales, but quite quickly the cloud will build and further showers will develop into the day. Western areas initially and then more central and eastern parts later on. It's a cool day on Thursday with temperatures struggling to reach the high teens and low 20s. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now you're going to want to know what happened when women. Where
are you going with this? Yeah. When women did what?
Women. I'm trying to say. How do you say the women's football team?
When the Lionesses.
Lionesses. Oh, I'm in so much trouble. Anyway, when the Lionesses took on China yesterday in the World Cup.
Well, it's giving it away there.
Women's World Cup. Yeah, don't read that. We'll tell you what happened in just a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It is 6:34, still to come on today's programme. At 6:45, we're talking to the Energy Minister Grant Shapps as he prepares to meet industry leaders in a push for investment in the UK's energy security drive.
And at 7:20, as a London restaurant gets in hot water due to its all-white male staff, we'll ask if businesses should have compulsory diversity quotas.
So we want to hear from you. you know what to do. gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can X us at
X us. It's
GB
very odd,
News.
isn't it? Yeah.
It's going to take us a while to get used to
Yeah,
that,
it is.
isn't it?
It's like almost like kiss us, isn't it? It's like send us a X, send us a. It's weird. I don't think it's going to catch on. You don't have to tweet. No, you don't have to kiss us. I'd rather you didn't. Tweets are fine.
Yeah, well,
As are emails.
Yes, but not tweets. They're not tweets.
Exactly.
It's all gone. Anyway, let's take you through all the sport this morning. Aidan McGee is here. Good morning.
Good morning to you both. Good to see you.
Morning.
So, let's talk World Cup.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there was pressure going
women.
The Lionesses, absolutely. I sat here yesterday, 24 hours ago, saying there's pressure on England going in to this final round of group games against this game against China, because there was a permutation yesterday which could have seen England eliminated. It would have been very harsh because they already had 6 points. Very rare to go out on 3 points for a win with 6 points. But there was a permutation which could have seen England sent home embarrassingly. And don't forget, they arrived there as the European champions. But goodness me, having scored just two goals in their previous 5 games, they then rattle off 3 in the first half, another 3 in the second half to win 6-1 against China and top Group D comfortably with 9 points. A brilliant performance by Lauren James, a sister of the Chelsea's England international Reece James. She scored twice, she created 3, she had a goal disallowed, she got a standing ovation from a 13,000 crowd in Adelaide. And it should lay to rest now any concerns England have, or Serena Wigman might have, about whether her side can score goals. They have significant injuries. They have a whole list of knee injuries that they've carried over from the last few months. They've also had a key retirement from a year ago when they won the Euros. And so all eyes now will go to next Monday and Nigeria, because that was a really sizzling performance. And I'm not seeing loads of other teams in the tournament getting through to try and win the tournament. I'm not seeing any obvious favourites. I mean, if you look through now, France have qualified narrowly. USA have still got a little bit of work to do. Actually,
Yes, they've not been very convincing so far.
No, USA are number 1 in the tournament, and that's the final frontier for England. Of course, they can't face USA in the Euros. They have to only face them in the World Cup. They lost to England, lost to the USA 4 years ago. I don't remember the tea celebrations that Alex Morgan, the USA striker, did when they beat England. She held up a cup of tea and mocking the Queen. Some said. I know. But England have improved a lot since then. Brazil are still involved. Japan. There are no major eliminations so far, and so England do have to contend that. But if I was those other teams who so far have been unconvincing, I look at England yesterday rattling 6 goals past China. I think, goodness me, they're the team to beat.
Right.
Harry Kane, where are we at with negotiations?
Well, apparently he's told Daniel Levy after talks that he wants this resolved in 11 days before they face Brentford in the opening game of the season on August the 13th. Bayern Munich remain in England. They won't go home just yet. They're absolutely determined to go home with England striker,
But they've upped it to 90 million now.
Yes, Tottenham. So that would be structured as 82 plus 9, so about 91 million pounds, we think. But Tottenham still want 100 million pounds. And we're entering a crazy era now where a player going into the last year of his contract is commanding a fee of almost 100 million pounds. Tottenham may yet get 100 million pounds. Yes, he's a stellar player. Yes, he's one of the top, most feared strikers around the world. But goodness me, anyone can get him for free next summer. That means United get into the fray next summer because they won't have any FFP stipulations, because it's only the wages they have to cover rather than the transfer fee. So I think it will get something. We'll know more by the weekend. I mean, I've been saying that for a little while, but I do think it will reach ahead now because Tottenham fans are getting fed up. Most of them are resigned to losing their star player. Some of them would like to forgo the transfer fee and think he's worth more to them by keeping him for another season. He rapidly increases their chances of qualifying the Champions League if you've got Harry Kane in the side. Their manager, Ange Postecoglou, recently arrived from Celtic. He'll want Harry Kane in his side, but I do think we'll see a resolution by the weekend. And we've entered an era now where big transfers take 3 months. You know, gone are the days when you read about it in the paper and that deal's done, you didn't even know where it came from. This is a deal which involves structuring. His wife Katie has been looking for houses in Munich. The Bild, which is the German red top tabloid, they're very reliable when it comes to Bayern Munich, and they think a deal's close.
Right, lovely. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you both.
Good to see you. Now, do stay with us. Coming up, can the Prime Minister keep his promise to end the use of migrant hotels? We'll be discussing that and much more as we go through the papers with Derek Lord and Claire Muldoon. That's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in
prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
6:42, let's bring you up to date with the front pages. This morning, The Guardian has pressure on Rishi Sunak amid claims the asylum seeker barge is a death trap.
The Mail, Just Stop Oil have boasted that their tactics have shaped the Labour Party's policy.
In the Mirror, Strictly Come Dancing star Anton de Beek has revealed he was stabbed by his father when he was a young man.
And finally, in the Eye, England had their sights on a World Cup win after qualifying in the knockout stages. They beat China 6-1.
Well, let's go through the papers in a bit more detail this morning. We're joined by author and businessman Derek Lord and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Good to see you both this morning.
Morning.
Derek, let's start with the Telegraph, should we? And the PM is saying migrant hotels have to stop.
Yes, well, I think I should start by saying that I think that migration is always a challenge, but never a crisis. Only 3% of the global population ever move. And the problem that we're experiencing in this country at the moment relates entirely to a commitment that David Cameron made to reduce migration numbers to the tens of thousands. Now, Rishi Sunak is saddled with that commitment, whether he likes it or not. I have to say that the whole issue of migration has been conflated with other things. So, for example, asylum seekers really are not necessarily or shouldn't necessarily be in the migration camps in the same way that mature students should not be either. So the actual headline figure is often quite misleading. But if you bury down into the detail, that's when you actually begin to understand the policy more in more sophistication. However, the barge is there, but it hasn't been inspected for health and safety reasons, and the fire
It has been inspected.
Well, in the Telegraph article, it says it hasn't. In the Guardian article, it also says that it hasn't, but it's about to. And I think that I think it was Claire, in fact, that said that it was like sort of Grenfell.
Floating Grenfell.
A floating Grenfell. We can't take those risks with human lives, with human life. So it's right that we delay only 50 people. We're only talking about 50 people who are supposed to be going on there in the first place.
Grenfell things. It's a very inflammatory statement.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
But the key thing is here that it's a private-public enterprise that just again is failing.
Yeah.
And it's failing human beings. And that, at the crux of anything, is abhorrent in my view. The fire safety regulators weren't on the floating barge to inspect it, and they won't pass the certificate because there is an issue. There might be an issue with the cladding. And when asked, the private company who's to run it, when asked when are you going to have the fire safety drill, oh, we're not going to because that might trigger the refugees.
Where's this cladding thing coming? It's a boat. It hasn't got cladding.
Well, it's got something on the outside.
Something on the outside.
Well, I mean, what's been reported so far is that there was a fire door that was fitted backwards, which obviously would need to be changed, and the concern the corridors are too narrow.
Well, that's quite a concern when you're trying to get people out in terms of ingress and egress, getting people out safely. I mean, it's a challenge, and we have to have belts and braces on this in order to have no accountability when something goes wrong. And we must have, full accountability if and when something goes wrong. We can't take that risk.
I must say also, it's an unavoidable observation that the very people that are complaining about the migration numbers are the very people that don't want to help the government actually find a solution to how we actually deal temporarily with those that are actually here. So, for example, Edward Lee in his Gainsborough constituency in RF Scampton, where 2,000 migrants are supposed to be living, doesn't want them in his constituency. Nobody wants them anywhere. So the floating barge idea, I think, is probably the best solution.
Yeah, but we have got the whole issue, and I know we're dwelling on one story a little bit here.
Yes.
But I mean, the whole issue here is we wouldn't be housing all these people if we could, A, process them at a sensible pace, which is a Home Office issue, and then we've got the agreements in place to ship people back out again.
Well, that's right. But also remember, too, though, that the reason why we are where we are is because the government have been told by the Supreme Court that it is currently illegal for them to send migrants for processing to Rwanda. So there's been a knock-on effect in that decision. And, of course, the rule of matter does matter in this country, even if it doesn't in the United States of America.
Well, we're getting on to that in a little while, Derek, with one of your other stories. Claire, let's go to you in the meantime. Let's look at the Mail and Just Stop Oil. They're boasting that they're actually shaping
the Labour policy. Of course they are. I mean, they're funding the Labour Party as well. Just Stop Oil have given a huge contribution. The owner, the CEO, has given a huge contribution to the Labour Party. And Keir Starmer has said, well, in the past he said, will you please just stop? Stop the aggravation, stop the hold-up, stop doing what you're doing because it's not making any sense. And also, interestingly, you're going to have Grant Shapps on later in any event. Labour won't overturn the Sunak oil plan. So we know the other day when Sunak has given more licences to both oil and gas as fossil fuels to aid the transition to net zero. Interestingly, Labour, although they will not issue new licences, they won't revoke the ones that Rishi has just given almost 2 days ago.
Right.
So there seems to be this, well, if they do that, that actually saves us because we need that for the transition. But Keir Starmer, etc., just don't want to admit that they can't go on and they're not actually for what Just Oil are doing. And I'm certainly not a fan of them. I think they really should have to just stop.
Well, look, on that note, it's a perfect segue, because just standing by is the Net Zero and Energy Security Secretary, Grant Shapps, who joins us now. Mr Shapps, it's always good to see you. Look, on this whole oil business, because I know you're meeting a lot of energy providers, energy industry leaders to get more investment, to look at how we deal with net zero and things. But how does that tie in with what we've seen with these new licences? Because some people are saying, well, it might be necessary, but it's going to inevitably push net zero back.
Yeah, well, the answer is it won't. And yeah, you're right. I'm meeting today with a bunch of energy companies at Number 10 who are going to invest £100 billion in renewables. And that's great. Everyone supports this country's transition to net zero. But you cannot get there by telling people we're simply going to stop using oil and gas. The only way to do that would be to tell people don't put your gas boiler on, don't drive a petrol car, and do that almost instantaneously. Unless you do that, what you're really saying is, we're not going to dig our own oil and gas, we'll import it instead. And that's basically Labour's policy on this. And the problem with importing it is it comes with 4 times the amount of embedded carbon. So they completely defeat their own objective of reducing carbon. So we're taking the sensible, pragmatic approach here. Yes, we'll have more oil and gas licenses, but we'll still meet our net zero targets because we're also massively investing in all these renewables as well.
I mean, talking about the summit today, you've said that you're going to be sending a clear message to Putin. But in reality, only a small fraction of our energy imports even came from Russia anyway. I think it was in 2021, it was only about 4%. So why has it taken so long for a summit like this to take place, to see this massive investment in renewables from the energy giants? I mean, why has it taken so long to take energy security seriously?
Yeah, well, that's a very good, probably longer-term question, because I actually happen to agree with you about the overall direction of energy security, which includes things like commissioning nuclear power stations. I became the first Secretary of State last November to put any government money into nuclear power for over 35 years. And no wonder we got ourselves into difficulty. But what this government wants is energy security from Britain. We've certainly seen in the world what happens if you're reliant as a world, as you say, on a tyrant like Putin. We were affected in a secondary way because what he did pushed up the price of oil and gas on a global market worldwide, despite the fact we provide quite a bit of our own. And despite the fact, actually, we have about 40% of our electricity last year was generated by renewables and nuclear, up from just 7% when we came to power. So it's not that we've not been doing anything, we've been moving very fast. This is just the latest round of investment into renewables by some of the very biggest energy companies in the land.
How do you sit with, and I know it's a slightly different issue, but how do you sit with these energy companies, and some of which, not all, but some of which have made profits, they've increased their profits by 900% as the rest of us have suffered? Now, I know it's you know, they're private businesses, they want to make money, all the rest of it, but that doesn't quite sit right morally, does it, when the country's struggling?
Well, for the first thing I want to say is this government has introduced a windfall tax at 75% effectively of their profits, and we use that cash to pay to every single viewer watching this morning, on average, about £1,500 of their bills last winter. So we used cash that we raised from energy companies by taxing them at very punitive levels. These are, of course, in the case of, and you rightly said, not all energy companies. We're talking about the world's biggest producers here, the BPs and Shells of the world, who actually produce most of their money in other parts of the world. It's not ours to tax in those cases. But we have taxed the British part of that in a very punitive way. And that's how we managed to pay for the energy price guarantee, for price caps, for things like that rebate that people saw on their bills, £400 last year, all of which added up to about £1,500 on average. So Ofgem, who are the regulator, set a figure for the amount of profits they can make, or rather for the margins they can make. Actually, in the last few years, they've been making some big chunky losses, which don't tend to get the publicity. And Ofgem have decided this is the right place to set the cap in order that they can use the money to reinvest. And this £100 billion today that I'm talking to the energy providers about at Downing Street, all that will be coming from their profits. So it's important that they exist in order to continue to generate electricity so we can switch on the lights.
Mr. Shapps, the Bibby Stockholm barge is in the port of Portland right now. It's sitting empty, still fresh delays over when those 50 migrants are going to be moved onto that barge. How difficult is it to put 50 people onto a barge?
There's clearly some sort of final stage health and safety checks and discussions going on. I'm not incredibly close to it or privy to it, but I know that they'll be resolved. And look, I mean, I agree with you. This barge should be used. By the way, I recently discovered this barge was actually used for housing migrants in Germany in the past. So I don't know why there's so much outrage about it. It seems to me perfectly obvious that we shouldn't be using hotels, hundreds or thousands even of rooms in hotels to house people waiting asylum applications, and most of all, that we have to stop the trade in people being brought across the channel by criminal gangs. And what is most revealing is that every single attempt we've made has been voted against by Keir Starmer's Labour Party, who have no plan at all to stop this. I say, getting this barge operational, if it takes a few more days, it takes a few more days. At least this government is doing something about it, which is very different from what Labour want to do, which is apparently support gangs who are continuing to bring people across the channel, whereas we're doing something to try and stop it.
Well, I'm sure they dispute that, as you can imagine. But anyway, Grant Shapps, it's good to talk to you, as always. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Very interesting what Grant Shapps had to say there. You will have a view on that at home. Do let us know what you thought of Mr Shapps' answers there. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Meanwhile, here's Aidan with your latest weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear. Some clear spells, however, it's a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday. Thursday begins with some sunshine, particularly for northern and western England as well as Wales, but quite quickly the cloud will build and further showers will develop into the day. Western areas initially and then more central and eastern parts later on. It's a cool day on Thursday with temperatures struggling to reach the high teens and low 20s. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Stay with us. More on those latest charges against Donald Trump just after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media.
We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 2nd of August. Today, Donald Trump is charged with attempting to overturn the 2020 election. Former president faces 4 criminal counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and witness tampering.
The Prime Minister has told GB News he will end the use of migrant hotels, as the Home Office indicates asylum seekers won't be moved onto a barge off the coast of Dorset until next week.
The Ministry of Justice will today publish new guidelines that will see drug possession and shoplifting offenders let off with cautions if it's a first offence. It's part of an attempt to ease the record backlog in the courts.
And we'll bring you your latest weather forecast.
Heavy rain and strong winds. It's not looking very summer-like today. Is there any improvements on the horizon? I'll have the full forecast coming up shortly.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We wanted to know about your favourite kitchen gadget because, well, I wouldn't call it a gadget, but pantries are apparently making a comeback. You'd have to build one because most houses don't have a pantry. But anyway, but in terms of gadgets, this has intrigued me. Karen, hi Karen, said her favourite gadget is her Thermomix. What is that, you may ask? I've just been looking online. It's expensive, she says, but it's all you need.
Oh.
It heats, blends, stirs, weighs, steams, emulsifies, mixes, mills, whips, kneads, chops, grinds and stirs.
Great. How much is one of these?
Well, I looked on the website. It's so expensive, it doesn't even tell you.
Oh, that's never a good sign.
So that's all worrying. But Bet from Highcliffe are my bread maker.
Oh, yeah.
Use it all the time, and when it does pack up, it will be replaced immediately. Problem with bread makers is they make you eat more bread.
Yeah, see, that's...
Can't stop.
My favourite thing in the universe is bread.
Oh, yeah.
It's yours as well, isn't it?
Oh, I love bread.
Yeah, so I think it would be very dangerous for me to have a bread maker. And the other issue with me is space. Got no space for all these utensils.
Yeah.
And cooking gadgets. And actually, I was digging into the pantry thing and why people love pantries so much. 21% of people say it's the best, most desirable feature in a kitchen. It's because lots of people use it as a garage for all the other appliances.
Oh, I see.
People have got so many these days. You need somewhere to put it all. And that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's all about space, isn't it? You need
storage.
So you need a pantry and you need a utility room.
Yeah. Both of them are luxuries, I'd say.
You need a big house to do it.
But yeah, no, bread maker is a very, very good one. Gary says his absolute essential item is a slow cooker, but also likes the air fryer and the kettle. And, of course, hot water is essential to make nice coffee in the morning, green tea. What would we be without our tea?
Oh, yeah. Steve says, our house is an old house. We have a pantry with original hooks for hanging hams, but confess it's more of a storage for a fridge and kitchen utensils. You need to get your food in there.
It's a garage. Are you going to get a pantry? I see you with a pantry.
I'd love a pantry, but no, I'd have to build one.
Maybe that could be the next project.
Oh, well, maybe.
Where I don't have a house, I just live vicariously through you. I'm like, so what are you doing with the garden?
Yeah, I know.
Would you like a pantry?
She's still not been over, you know.
I know, I need to.
It's not happening.
Once you get the puppy...
Oh, yeah.
I'll be there.
OK.
Put me in.
Right.
Pencil me in.
Don't want to see me, just the dog.
I see a lot of you, though.
Oh, thanks.
But never too much. Never too much. Would always be more.
Stop digging. When you're in a hole, stop digging.
Stop.
Right.
Anyway, get in touch. We love to hear from you, don't we? gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, our main news this morning, and Donald Trump is facing charges relating to attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Yes, the 4 counts include conspiracy to defraud the United States, witness tampering, and also follows an inquiry into the January 6th riots.
Well, the indictment comes from Special Counsel Jack Smith, who said the uprising, which saw the storming of the US Capitol building, was an unprecedented assault on democracy.
But in a statement, the Trump campaign said the charges were ridiculous and accused President Biden of election interference.
Well, let's talk to Steve Gill, who's a former trade advisor to two US presidents and joins us now from Colorado. Steve, it's always good to see you. When we've talked to you about previous charges brought against Trump, you've said, well, look, it looks like it's politically motivated. But these are very serious, aren't they? You look at some of the evidence that's listed here, it's going to be hard to argue against some of this, isn't it?
Well, first of all, my favorite kitchen utensil is my cell phone that I use to call local restaurants delivered to my house. And Stephen, I'm guessing that's you as well. I think these charges are, again, trumped up to not use a pun. It's no coincidence that these charges were dropped by Joe Biden's chief political persecutor 1 day after Hunter Biden's close business associate and friend throws them not under the bus, but also runs back and forth over them, testifying that Joe Biden was involved in at least 20 conversations where Hunter was selling access, not really to Joe Biden, but access to him because of his access to his daddy. And I think it's not a coincidence that this comes 1 day after that killing testimony on Joe Biden. The charges are really very scant, though. When you look at what there's actually contained in these 4 indictments, they're trying to create Donald Trump's freedom of speech to question the veracity of this election, the credibility of that election, and that's his free speech right to do so. Trying to criminalize that is beyond anything that U.S. law does, and there's not even any of the legislation that the prosecutor cites in his indictment. And then when he did his press conference, he was talking about the insurrection that Donald Trump supposedly inspired, but didn't charge him with that because Donald Trump actually told the crowd, protest peacefully. So this is just another piling on of charges that will carry no actual weight other than in a jury in Washington, D.C., where only 5.4% of the residents in that city voted for Donald Trump. So this is all pushed to let Democrats vote to prosecute Donald Trump.
The timing of this is very significant, though, isn't it? Because it does mean that Donald Trump is going to be essentially fighting these charges at the same time as running a presidential campaign.
Yeah, it's definitely a distraction, and we've learned that a lot of Donald Trump's campaign financing is going to legal fees. I think one account has it at $40 or $50 million to paying lawyers for all these charges, and there may be more to come in Georgia dealing with this same election issue. Here's what's interesting, though. This prosecutor, I don't know if he got his law degree from some pub in the south side of London, but he has now handed Donald Trump the opportunity to subpoena and question witnesses under oath about the very thing Donald Trump has been claiming, that this was a bogus election, that it was fraudulent, that it was stolen from him. He's just handed subpoena power to Donald Trump to actually delve into those issues when he's not had that opportunity before. So I think the prosecutor didn't think this through before he made these bogus charges. In this case, it hands Donald Trump a pretty good weapon.
Yeah, but when you say, Steve, you know, your people have got the right to challenge an election result. Well, fair enough, but you can only do that, can't you, by ascertaining the facts. And what is made clear in this indictment, and we knew this was the case, actually, because we'd heard this stuff already, was the idea you look at Detroit, for example, and Michigan, and Donald Trump was told by the Attorney General, no, this was all fair and above board, but then went on to say Detroit's totally corrupt. It's absolutely corrupt. And it's not just some Joe in the street saying it, is it? It's the President of the United States. It carries more weight. I mean, how can that go unchallenged?
Well, keep in mind that after Donald Trump got elected in 2016, you had Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, say that it was a fraudulent election. You had Hillary Clinton and others challenge the election, say it wasn't valid. He stole the election. They didn't get prosecuted. The other thing is that none of the cases involving whether or not there was actually election fraud, repeated voters that were dead or didn't exist, there's some indications that that was taking place in places where there were narrow election results, 20 or 30,000 votes determining whether a state went into the Trump column or went into the Biden column. So these have never actually been thoroughly explored or vetted, and this may give that opportunity to do so. And again, they've never prosecuted the people in Congress and Hillary Clinton who challenged the credibility of Donald Trump's election in 2016. Why haven't they been prosecuted?
How do you think Donald Trump is taking this? I mean, the statement from the Trump campaign asked questions about the timing, says it's going to be right in the middle of his winning campaign for 2024. It also calls it an un-American witch hunt. But this is one of many, many charges now against Trump. He must be feeling pretty tired at this point, or do you think this is giving him more fight?
Well, I think we know enough about Donald Trump to know he will not go quietly into that good night. He will come out swinging. He will swing till the end. I think the challenge, and Stephen raised a great point, this is a lot of different challenges that he's having to face at the same time. Again, it's a drain on his campaign funds. It's a drain on his energy and on his time. It's a distraction. And I think that's the purpose of what the Biden Department of Justice or Department of Injustice is trying to do. They're trying to stop their chief rival, a guy that's leading them in the polls, in most polls in the United States. They're trying to knock him out of the race because he's their most formidable challenge to Joe Biden staying in office and being able to keep the FBI and the Department of Justice and all these other corrupt weapons of the Democratic Party in place. So I think there are a lot of folks on the Democratic Party side who have an interest in making sure that their chief rival, the guy most likely to beat Joe Biden, isn't going to be in the game.
Steve, good to see you. As always, thanks for your analysis, appreciate it. And we're going to be talking to someone who I think takes an opposing view to Steve in the next hour. So bring your balance on that. And we need the balance because when it comes to what you think, it's pretty 50-50. Nicholas says he's as guilty as a puppy sitting next to a pile of dog mess. Adrian from Sheffield says Trump is 100% innocent.
Yeah.
Sean says Trump is a lunatic.
It's dividing you, isn't it? Frank said, could be said that Sunak plotted and overturned the result of the UK general election. He tried and failed twice to get elected.
No, not quite. And this, you see, this is what, and I do, for no offence, Hugo, but this drives me a little bit crackers in that Hugo says Trump won more votes in 2020 than any incumbent in US history. That's right. And yet we're asked to believe that Biden, currently squatting in the White House, not only beat Trump's tally, but as a result got more votes than any candidate in US history. Really, look at the evidence. Well, they have looked at the evidence, and that's the number of votes cast, Hugo. I mean, that's the whole point. You know, I don't know what other evidence... If you don't like the evidence that you're presented with, you can't just say, well, it's not true. But this is the problem I think Trump's had. You know, there has been, despite what Steve says, there's been loads of court cases in the States. A lot of them were thrown out before they even got started because the evidence just wasn't there to back up what Trump was saying, that it was all stolen from him. So there isn't any evidence to back him up. Just isn't. So you do wonder with it all.
Yeah, but it's certainly dividing you this morning. As do keep your views coming in on that story or any of the stories that we're talking about today. We do like to hear from you at gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, the Prime Minister has vowed to stop housing illegal migrants in hotels, as the Home Office has hinted that asylum seekers won't be moved onto a barge off the coast of Dorset until at least next week.
Well, speaking to GB News, Rishi Sunak said the current system of migrant housing needs to change.
What's going on currently is completely wrong. We've got a situation which is unfair. British taxpayers are forking out £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in hotels and other accommodation. That's clearly wrong. It's clearly unfair, and that's why I want to put an end to it. Now, in the short term, we're finding alternative sites like the barges that we're bringing in, which are new ways to deal with this problem, which no one else has done, but I've done. But fundamentally, if we want to stop this, we've got to stop people coming here in the first place. And that's why stopping the boats is one of my 5 priorities. That's why we've passed the toughest law that any government has ever passed, which will help us do that.
Well, his comments follow protests in Portland over the docking of the Bibby Stockholm barge, which is now causing disruption to other industries.
Well, last month, a cruise liner was forced to cancel its planned stopover there, costing local businesses up to £400,000 in lost revenue. Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has the story.
To Portland, the United States cruiser Nashville arrived from America for a short stay in this country.
They've been coming here since 1872, cruise liners arriving at Portland Port off the coast of Weymouth. And still they come, 55 cruise ships due in this year alone. But there's a new vessel in town, and it's threatening to disrupt the port's thriving business. Last month, Princess Cruise Line's Regal Princess refused to dock at Portland because of this. Protests against the arrival of Bibi Stockholm. Hot exchanges. Cruise passengers take the bus into Weymouth, where they spill into shops, restaurants, cafes. They ride the trains, they view the sights, they spend their cash. In a statement, the port said cruise calls to Portland Port contribute £10 million to the local economy every year. This includes spending in shops, restaurants, cafes, pubs, tourist attractions, for guides and taxis, as well as for those in the supply chain, such as bus and coach operators, and through indirect spend. Alex Bailey is the organiser of No to the Barge. They're timing their protests with the arrival of cruise ships, hitting Portland Port in the pocket.
So for us, this is about the inhumanity and really sharing with the passengers on the cruise liners. It is unfortunate that many businesses are suffering from this, but we're already seeing people selling their homes, for example. We're already seeing quantitative information like Airbnb businesses struggling. And as you know from previous, the pubs are also losing money from this.
Pubs like the Pulpit. It's the height of the tourist season, yet the pub trade is dead.
I think it's got a large part to play with it, yeah. You know, whether they're expecting confrontation from any protests that are down there, I don't know what they're thinking about it really, but we've got basic civil rights, human rights, and all we want is our rights heard. We want a consultation, which we never had, and we want them to have our consent. It could have been a no. Who knows? It could have been a yes. No one will know because we never got the chance to say.
But they're saying plenty now.
Bill Reeves, I call you out. Come and speak to us. What are you doing? The vulgar disparity, the way they are earning money. You've got your cruise line with your luxury passengers, you know, on a luxury ship, and then a few hundred feet away you have 500 men, vulnerable men, on a barge that was designed for less than half that. That is not going to mix. So you need to make your choice, Bill Reeves.
GB News has asked Bill Reeves, the CEO of Portland Port, for comment, but so far he hasn't wanted to speak to us. In the meantime, the cruise passengers that do arrive wander the streets of Weymouth still, cash in hand. But as tensions in the port rise, many are asking for how much longer. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, let's talk to the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, who's here in the studio. I mean, the problem with all of this is whatever the government comes up with to say we're going to attack, we're going to stop the small boats, we're going to ship people off to Rwanda, we're going to put people on barges, we're going to stop using migrant hotels. None of it actually happens.
That's so striking, and I think there's two sides to that. On the one hand, there's the fact that there are always these attempts to obstruct anything that the government is doing. And I think that's a problem democratically. If you've got a government that's elected, it says it's going to pursue a certain policy, it should be able to do that without legal challenges or encumbrances getting in the way. Of course, if this barge isn't fire safe, that should be looked into, but you can't help but feel that some of the pushback is maybe just because people don't like the idea in the first place. But the other side is the genuine incompetence, the dysfunction, the failure of the policy in general. The fact that the government is having to resort to what I think are quite blunt tactics, quite inhumane tactics in some respects, to try and get a handle on this particular issue is a sign of failure, and they can't even do that right. And what I think we've seen so clearly from that report as well is that one of the big problems when we're talking about the question of asylum seekers and migration is because of the fact that it's communities which are least able to bear the burden on services, where there's most likely, I think, to be kind of local resistance, is who are having to put up with it. So Portland is, I think, amongst the 10% most deprived areas in the country. Knowsley, where we saw those horrendous protests not too long ago, is, I think, the third or fourth most deprived local authority in the country. Disproportionately, this is where the issue is being pushed upon. The image recently of migrants outside Pimlico hotels, that's the exception, that's not the rule. And I think regardless of where you stand on this particular issue, regardless of who you are in this system, it's failing everyone, from local communities to migrants to the government. So that dysfunction is just clear for all to see at this point, I think.
We seem to focus so much on housing migrants, don't we, and where it should be, where that should be taking place. And we talk a lot about processing as well and how long that takes. But really, the root of the issue is people getting on those boats in the first place and those human trafficking gangs. And surely we just need to start at the root of the problem. We just heard from a viewer now, sorry, didn't leave your name, who said, we have the Navy, why are we not patrolling our shores and acting as a deterrent?
I think you're completely right insofar as, at the end of the day, no one should accept the fact that you have tens of thousands of people making an incredibly perilous journey across in order to try and get into this country. It's not good for the people involved in that trade. It's not good for the people who are being exploited by that trade, I should say. It's also not good for the communities who are quite understandably saying all these people arriving who we don't know who they are, this isn't being controlled, are understandably very upset by that. There are obviously other issues in the system. I mean, the processing time has shot up exponentially in recent times. There's never been a proper accounting for that. There is also a problem with certain people. I think most members of the British public would accept genuine refugees from Afghanistan and so on, who have had a lot of trouble in terms of trying to access safe and legal routes. They're usually about the kind of second largest grouping in the boat crossing, certainly since the Albanian issue was dealt with. So there are all these separate problems, but as you say, the fundamental problem you go back to is just that there isn't that issue of control. And from my perspective, as someone who is in favour of migration, would like to see a generous asylum policy, if you don't have control over the situation, you're never going to be able to convince the public to trust you to kind of look after it, to convince them of a more generous policy, because at the moment it just looks like chaos, and they're not wrong to think that, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Tom, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Now let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. And energy industry leaders are set to gather at Downing Street today for talks with Net Zero Minister Grant Shapps about investment in the sector. Mr Shapps told us that the Conservatives have made good progress on the issue during their 13 years in government.
Actually, we have about 40% of our electricity last year was generated by renewables and nuclear, up from just 7% when we came to power. So it's not that we've not been doing anything, we've been moving very fast. This is just the latest round of investment into renewables by some of the very biggest energy companies in the land.
The Ministry of Justice is set to release a draft code of practice looking at how police should respond to low-level first-time offenders. The new government guidance could see shoplifters, thieves and those in possession of drugs let off from being sent to court, but only if it's a first offence.
And the use of AI in breast cancer screenings is safe and could halve the workload of radiologists. That's according to a new study. Researchers found that computer-aided detection could spot cancer in mammograms at a similar rate to radiologists.
Donald, where's your trousers?
What's that from?
Donald, where's your trousers? I don't know. Well, anyway, should we talk pants?
The reason that Stephen's singing is because this menswear guru has taken a swipe at Rishi Sunak because of his trousers.
Yes, look at them. Half-mast, we would have called them back in the day.
Half-mast, yes. Now, apparently, this guy, Derek Guy, is a menswear guru. He talks a lot about men's fashion all around the world. Anyway, he's put his attention on to Rishi Sunak and asking why his trousers so short. Is it to create an illusion of height on the world stage?
No, really?
Optical illusion to make your legs look longer.
Is that what it is?
If you see your ankles.
No, I just think he thinks it's fashionable, because it was fashionable at one stage, but frankly, it looks ridiculous.
It does.
It does look ridiculous.
I've noticed it on him before. I don't think it looks too bad on the right there when you're going for that more casual look.
Oh, no, that's what I hate the most.
Oh, see, I don't think that looks too bad. I think he just looks a bit wavy, you know, a bit edgy.
Wavy?
But I think wavy, you know. What's the word you'd use?
Trendy.
Trendy. But in a suit, I just don't think it looks very professional.
No, that was shot in the middle.
You look like you're wearing kids' trousers.
It's just not right. It's just not right. He is not a tall man. But that doesn't matter.
But if he's not a tall man, he must be having them tailored to look that short.
It's a deliberate thing.
It is a deliberate
But it's a fashion thing. It's what the youth are doing. Charlie, our producer, wears half-mast trousers all the time. It drives me crackers. I don't want... You shouldn't be able to see your socks at all.
But it can...
Unless you sat down.
It can look very wavy. And that is what Charlie is.
Wow.
But not Rishi. I would say Rishi needs to stick to...
You're the Prime Minister of the
trousers.
United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Mr Sunak. Wear trousers that come down to your shoes.
Yeah.
They're meant to sit on top of your shoes.
Yes.
I'm sat down so you can see my socks.
And what socks have you got on? Aliens?
Oh, yes, I have.
Yeah, it's
Look,
got space
I'm going to
aliens
stand
on
up.
his socks.
You can't. So you see, look at this.
Oh, they are perfect, to be fair. I'm telling you now, they are perfect.
You see? Sit on top of your shoes.
They hit your shoe perfectly. Well done, Dol.
Thank
well
you.
done. Maybe Rishi Sunak should take lessons from you.
I can help you, Prime Minister. It's not a problem. For a very reasonable fee, I will give you fashion advice.
Between the two of us, and look, we do very well at dressing ourselves. We coordinate very well, don't we, in the morning? So we can offer services to you, Mr Sunak,
yes,
if you would be that way inclined.
But if you're a fan of the half-mast trouser on a gentleman, get in touch, tell us why, gbviews@gbnews.com. But frankly, I suspect most of you think trousers should be worn at a correct length.
Now here's Aidan McGibbon with your Wednesday forecast.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear. Some clear spells, however, it's a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday. Thursday begins with some sunshine, particularly for northern and western England as well as Wales, but quite quickly the cloud will build and further showers will develop into the day. Western areas initially and then more central and eastern parts later on. It's a cool day on Thursday with temperatures struggling to reach the high teens and low 20s. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, as a London restaurant gets in hot water because of its all-male white staff, we'll ask if businesses should have compulsory diversity quotas.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:31. Still lots to come on today's programme.
Yeah, at 8:20, after a vegan influencer died of starvation, we'll debate whether it's time to stop encouraging all-plant diets.
At 9:15, we'll speak to the couple turning an old RAF radar station into a brand new spaceport. This is on a tiny island off the coast of Scotland. You'll love that one.
I will love that. I want to know if there's...
You want to move there?
I want to send people into space, so not just little boxes, which I imagine is what they're doing.
Oh, right.
But anyway, we'll get there in
One
the
thing
end.
at a time.
One thing at a time, one step at a time, one small step and all that. Let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, Thomas Straker, a restaurant boss who boasts nearly 4 million social media followers, came under fire this week after posting a picture of his team on Instagram. And why the controversy? Because they're all men and they're all white.
Yes. So today we're asking, should more be done to promote diversity in the workplace? And do compulsory diversity quotas need to be introduced? Well, Tom Slater thinks that diversity quotas are a bad idea. Meanwhile, political commentator Nigel Nelson believes more needs to be done to support diversity in the workplace. Nigel, let's start with you, shall we? So tell us, why are diversity quotas a good thing?
It's not so much the quota, it's positive action to make sure that underrepresented groups are able to get jobs. And that should be the compulsory bit. I mean, the problem really is that employers tend to hire people who are like them. So there's a lot of unconscious bias going on. David Cameron had a kitchen cabinet of old Etonians because he was one. And Boris Johnson had a cabinet of 65% who'd gone to private schools. Again, because that's where he came from. So really it's a matter of combating this. At the end of the day, you probably can't reach a quota as such. What you can do is to ensure that people from underrepresented groups have every chance that they should have to get a job.
Yeah, but how would that apply? I mean, if we put that onto you, Nigel, and you're our senior political commentator, and if we said, yeah, you're the best person for the job, we know you're brilliant, we've known you for years, but we're going to give it to a white Asian lady, she's not as good as you, but we want to up the quota.
Yeah, there are always the problems there, and obviously that would be positive discrimination, which is illegal. So what you can't do is exclude, for instance, someone like me just because I'm a middle-aged white man. The RAF paid out £5,000 to 31 white men because they excluded them from being trainee pilots. What you're talking about here is, for instance, the tie-break rule. So that means if there are two equal candidates for the job, say I was going for a job with the Asian lady you were talking about, our qualifications are absolutely identical, then the job should go to her rather than to me.
And why is that?
Well, on the basis that the only way that you can, it's going back to the unconscious bias thing, the only way that you can get inclusion and diversity is to use this kind of positive action. So if you don't do that, then if I am actually going up to a boss who is also a middle-aged white man, he might be more inclined to actually choose me because I'm most like him.
Right, Tom, what do you make of it all?
Well, I think Nigel's quite right to say that in terms of the current law that we have, you can't positively discriminate. You can practice what under the Equality Act is called positive action. But I think what we've seen in the RAF scandal and so on is that often this is a distinction in, search of a difference, really. A lot of places end up in practice straying over into the other category, because what you're inviting people to do is to judge candidates, even if it's in a tie-break situation, on the basis of their immutable characteristics. And I think whilst that might also lead to people like Nigel in this hypothetical situation against this other Asian journalist losing out, I think it's also really bad for ethnic minorities. It treats them as sort of permanent children who constantly need that extra leg up. It also presumes that employers and the rest of us have these unconscious biases, that we're racist even if we don't realise it, which I think is a really ugly idea to spread throughout the workplace. And, of course, no one sensible, in my view, is against diversity in the workplace. Where we're talking about diversity quotas, though, I think it introduces a kind of racial, gender bean counting, which can only divide up workers, introduce a kind of unpleasant aspect to how we recruit things. And I'm just not convinced it actually helps the groups that it claims to want to help in the long term.
Can I just say, and I'll put this to both of you, really, the one thing that struck me about the picture from the Straker restaurant is saying, well, they're all white men, right? But they're different ages. For all we know, they could be different social statuses, they could be different sexuality. We've no idea. Mm-hmm. We've no idea what the diversity actually is amongst these people. We're only seeing what's on the surface. I mean, that's a fair point, Nigel, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you take a positive action and you end up with a lineup like that, I'm sure Thomas Straker wishes he'd never posted it. It could well be that you finally do get a group of just white men. But taking one of your hypothetical examples, supposing Ellie decides that she wants to work on a building site or in engineering, these tend to be male stereotypical jobs. And what an employer should be doing is trying to alter that kind of image. So, for instance, positive action would include, say, in engineering, women, job fairs for women, organised by women. That would be perfectly legal, and that would encourage more women into those kind of jobs.
But Nigel, there are just some industries, so me on a building site, for instance, I mean, you couldn't pay me to work on a building site. I think there's many
Not with
women.
those nails.
Well, no, not with these nails. But it's just something that wouldn't appeal to me. It wouldn't appeal to my friends. I mean, if there's a push for diversity on a building site, for instance, you would really struggle to meet that 50% threshold for women. And it would be the same in something like the beauty industry. Of course, there'd be some men, just like there'd be some women on a building site. But you would really struggle to fill that 50% quota. So in some industries, and you could argue, even in hospitality in terms of being a chef, it is a male-dominated industry, and that is generally because the other sex doesn't actually want to be in that environment. It doesn't appeal.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine, Ellie. On the basis that you'd rather present a breakfast show than build a house, that's absolutely fine. But for women who actually would like to do a construction job, they should be given the chance to actually do it. So if you had positive action, the European Convention on Human Rights, for instance, has a very good code for this. If you adopted that code as a compulsory thing, it would mean that people, women who actually did want to do those jobs, wouldn't feel excluded from them.
Yeah. Also, we're presuming that they are excluded at the moment from these workplaces. I think where it's clear that discrimination takes place, that should obviously be done away with. Any barriers should be got rid of. But when you get into positive action, which, as I say, is often just positive discrimination under another name, you get all kinds of problems. I think we can only look to the US to see how murky this can get. Obviously, they've had the whole Supreme Court ruling recently. And what happened with affirmative action in universities was not that your white, middle-class, heterosexual males were losing out. The primary people who were losing out as a consequence of that system were Asian Americans, because they tended to do very well at school, they tended to outperform various different groups, and so they were forcibly discriminated against at various different schools. So when we talk about positive discrimination, when we talk about quotas and so on, we kind of always assume that the people who are going to lose out are the kind of white heterosexual males. It's not necessarily the case. When you take merit entirely out of the equation, you can often end up in all kinds of horrendous situations, which is why I think it's better that we just focus on merit and focus on removing barriers where they exist, rather than trying to create leg-ups where I don't think they're necessary.
Look, we are out of time. I'm going to get yelled at. So briefly, Nigel, if you would, you talk about unconscious bias. Doesn't that work both ways? Because people are looking at that picture and saying, in effect, it's sexist and racist. But they wouldn't say that if it was a picture of a team at your favourite Indian restaurant, where you've got a group of Asian men stood there in their aprons. No one would have a go at that, saying you haven't got a diverse workforce.
No, you're right, Stephen. I mean, it's a really tricky line to actually walk. However, merit obviously is the main point. People should be employed on merit. It's only when you have people of equal merit that the job should go to somebody from an underrepresented group.
OK, look, really good to see you both this morning. Nigel, Tom, thank you very much indeed. It's a tricky subject, handled nicely.
Yes, and very politely as well by both parties there. So thank you, Tom, and thank you to Nigel. You will have an opinion on that at home. Do we need diversity quotas? What do you think of that restaurant as well? Do you think Thomas Straker deserved that backlash, or do you think it's all very unfair? Do let us know on the views.
Yeah, we've got lots coming up for you in just a minute. All the papers.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 7:45 and it's paper time, and we're going through the papers in more detail this morning with author and businessman Derek Lord and the broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
And Derek, let's start with you, shall we? And this story in The Guardian, in fact, many of the papers today, Donald Trump, more criminal counts.
Indeed. Indeed, and I think it's probably worth saying that the papers had gone to bed before this story broke, so it doesn't actually feature in the physical papers, it's all online.
Online, yeah.
But I think I want to deal with this story in numbers, because in 2020, the year that has led to the 4 charges, 159 million people voted in the United States of America, the highest electoral turnout since 1900. Joe Biden got 51% of the votes and Donald Trump 46%. There was a very clear and decisive victory for Biden. There is no room for uncertainty about this. And the way in which Donald Trump behaved to try and suggest that the figures were in some way false was clearly wrong, and he now stands on trial for the way in which he behaved, because in effect he was really trying to overturn democracy.
But as it says in the indictment, the defendant has a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been fraud during the election and that he had won. Which, now, he's right, you can say he did that. What he's denying is that he also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. And we don't know that he did that.
No. Well, the documents that relate to these 4 charges are 45 or 46 pages long. So one would need to read the details of that to know exactly what the charges are going to be. But the thing that strikes me about this is that Capitol Hill was awashed with protest and riots, and it's arguable, it seems to me, that Donald Trump might have incited that. That would clearly be a criminal offence.
I think that's one of the charges, isn't it?
It is probably,
yeah.
it is probably one.
And then that brings into the whole thing, will Donald Trump run for presidency or will he give it the ticket to DeSantis? I mean, you couldn't really write the script for this because it's just madness.
But the other thing that seems to me to be a broader issue, but as equally important, is that the way in which the media are covering this is entirely in political terms. And this is, in fact, because the judicial system in the United States of America is judicial and political, the way in which they're appointed, and that's something that could never happen here.
It's just become totally tribal.
It's become totally tribal, politically tribal, and I think that that's really rather dangerous. They used to say that having a written constitution was the solution to all the problems in the United States of America. It's actually now become the problem.
Well, luckily for Biden, he won't be able to remember much of it, as he doesn't remember much in any event.
That's a whole other issue.
It is indeed.
Mind you, maybe Trump should give up this and try and get on I'm a Celebrity.
I think he ought to, just like our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Can you imagine? I can actually, him being in the jungle, notwithstanding the fact that Hancock went in, that I wasn't completely in agreement with. But Boris Johnson, yes, I would like to see him. He will be chosen for all of the Bush-Tucker trials, of that I've no doubt.
And he'd do them all with gusto.
He would do them with gusto, great gusto. I can see him there having a lot of banter with Ant and Dec. I think it would be a great signing. I don't think it would diminish him at all, because like him or hate him, he is this idea of this pantomime villain. In fact, if he doesn't go into I'm a Celebrity around about Christmas time, I think he ought to be in Panto with Biggins, perhaps. But can you imagine? I mean, I think there's a myriad of reasons why I think Boris would go in.
Well, he'd probably win for a kick-off.
Notwithstanding, I think the best one, he'd be able to get rid of Carrie and the kids for a while and have a bit of peace and quiet.
Ouch.
Do you think he'd do it, though, Claire? Do you think this is appeal? Because he's not short of a bob or two now. I mean,
it's not about the money. It's about the power. It's about the public opinion. It's about being out there. It's about his name out there every single day. There's nothing more than a narcissist wants than people to be talking about it. We're talking about it now. Can you imagine if he actually got signed up and went in?
I think
it would be TV gold.
Yes, I think Boris Johnson's probably the only person that actually would frighten the snakes.
Well, I tell you, he'd win.
And it would be great entertainment value. You can only imagine, can't you?
Yeah.
The scenes.
Well, look,
we might not have to imagine.
From the former PM to the current PM, Derek in the Times and Sunak's fashion. You're a man with some sartorial elegance.
Not nearly as fashionable as Mr. Sunak, and it's interesting to me that there is this story, and it actually is covered very liberally in the Times. And I'm not quite sure whether this is a story about heightism or whether it's a story about fashion. It seems to straddle both lines. But the central point is whether or not it looks appropriate or indeed stylish for Mr. Sunak to wear short trousers. And there's also the suggestion that actually he's wearing children's clothes to avoid paying VAT.
No.
Which I thought was very, 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 very funny.
I mean, I tell you why I hate it. And it's because it reminds me of being at secondary school when, you're having your growth spurts and your trousers don't fit. It's obvious to everyone that your trousers don't fit anymore. And it's like you're desperate to get a pair that actually touch your shoes again.
Well, I think that Ellie actually hit upon the right observation.
No.
I mean, I think it looks appalling in a suit. I really do. But I think in casual wear, it's sort of, you can almost get away with it.
And you are a man of taste,
Don't be ridiculous.
But the other thing I was going to say, Ellie and Claire, you'll both reinforce this. Women, particularly in politics, were always being subjected to how they look.
Yeah.
Whether the makeup was right, whether the colour of the dress was right, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But now, men are a target too.
Well, I'll tell you...
It's what we call a balanced ticket.
I'll tell you something for nothing. There's more column inches about Sunak's trousers than there are actually inches on his inside leg.
Oh, that is tallest, shortest,
tightest.
No, it's true. It's fact. It's fact.
I don't think... there's nothing wrong with... If you're a shorter person, fine, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, this whole business that you've got to be a great, tall, strapping man.
No one's saying that, but you have to wear trousers that
Nelson
fit.
was about the same height as...
and Napoleon, was he not smaller?
Yeah.
Where do your trousers come up to, Derek? When you stand, do they come up to the shoe?
My trousers come from Redwood and Fellow, and I would recommend anybody to go there. I've been going there since I was 21.
Oh, there you go. Well, the rest of us can't afford it, Derek. Let's have a very quick... Have we got time? I don't know what our time Alzheimer's. Let's have we've got 30 seconds to talk about the Mail and having 3 daughters, Claire.
Well, I've got them.
Well,
I've got 3 daughters
and
I've got my son. It is and it isn't. I mean, what they're saying is that it affects women's mental health having daughters. I would say that it affects anyone's mental health having daughters. And I actually wanted 4 girls, and when I found out my 4th child was going to be a boy, I couldn't speak for the whole afternoon. I thought, oh my God, no, it's not someone that's going to be like my husband, now ex-husband. I thought, oh, no, there's nothing more abhorrent. However, other people have said, is it practice, practice, practice perfect?
No, you can't say that.
Well, I can, and he sometimes is my favourite.
And have you found him easier than girls?
He's much easier to deal with.
So
much easier.
Girls are hard work.
Mentally, they're really hard work. They're really gnarly, and they use situations, they manipulate, and trying to be on top of that, it's really difficult.
Oh,
well, there you go. I've never known anything so sexist and misogynistic in all my life, coming from the 2 women here this morning.
Well, I'm just fascinated because I know I'm hard work for my mother, but
hard work for
you're just hard work, period, Ellie.
I can't imagine. Well, yeah, probably not wrong. I couldn't imagine her having 3 of me. Hard work.
Lord, no, thanks. Look, thank you both. It's been great to see you this morning.
Thank you, both of you.
Let's get a check on your Wednesday weather with Aidan.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear. Some clear spells, however, it's a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday. Thursday begins with some sunshine, particularly for northern and western England as well as Wales, but quite quickly the cloud will build and further showers will develop into the day. Western areas initially and then more central and eastern parts later on. It's a cool day on Thursday with temperatures struggling to reach the high teens and low 20s. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, do stay with us. We'll have more on those latest charges against Donald Trump.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 2nd of August. Today, Donald Trump is charged with attempting to overturn the 2020 election. He faces 4 criminal counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and witness tampering.
The Prime Minister has told GB News he will end the use of migrant hotels, as the Home Office indicates asylum seekers won't be moved onto a barge off the coast of Dorset until next week. The Net Zero Secretary, Grant Shapps, will hold talks today with energy industry leaders to discuss investment in the sector. Earlier, he told us the government's making good progress on the issue.
Actually, we have about 40% of our electricity last year was generated by renewables and nuclear, up from just 7% when we came to power. So it's not that we've not been doing anything, we've been moving very fast. This is just the latest round of investment into renewables by some of the very biggest energy companies in the land.
The Ministry of Justice will today publish new guidelines that will see drug possession and shoplifting offenders let off with cautions. The proposal is part of an attempt to ease the record backlog in the courts.
Also coming up for you, we've got the latest forecast with Aidan.
Heavy rain and strong winds. It's not looking very summer-like today. Is there any improvements on the horizon? I'll have the full forecast coming up shortly.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. We're still talking trousers here. It's got you going this morning. This is a menswear guru, Derek Guy. He's come out swinging, really, for Rishi Sunak, and his short trousers, questioning, is he doing it to create an illusion of height on the world stage? He's asking, why are his trousers always so short?
I think he's just trying to be trendy.
Do you?
Yeah.
And it is trendy, I'll have you know, because just as we spoke about it, and you showed your perfectly measured trousers that just hit the top of your shoe, Tom Frost, our producer, walked in with his trousers cut off at the ankle, and he said, it's the fashion now.
It might be the fact. I mean, to be fair, his were rolled up.
And yes, exactly.
Showing not very white socks.
So this could be Mr Sunak just trying to appeal to the younger voter.
Maybe, but it looks ridiculous. Come on, you're the Prime Minister. Debbie says, I totally agree with you about Rishi's trousers. They're way too short. I think his suits always look too small anyway. Well, he does wear a very tight suit.
Yeah.
But do you know what? I don't blame him for that, because he's got the frame, he's very, very trim, so if you can get away with a sort of very fitted suit, why not?
Why not?
I'm all for that, but just get the trousers right.
I will say, though, I've been doing a bit of a deep dive into this.
have
When
you?
you see Rishi Sunak actually sitting down with these trousers, they're halfway up his calf.
Yeah, well, they do. They ride up,
Really
don't
do
they?
ride up, yes.
But Mike says, I hate trouser bottoms touching my shoes.
Oh.
But he also says Sunak's are too much. So you'd split the difference, would you, Mike? And Charles says, can't he afford trousers that fit? Well, he certainly can.
He obviously gets them tailored that way. But I don't know whether it's to make him look taller, whether it's to be more fashionable. Perhaps it's just personal preference. Do you think it looks appropriate, though? Do you think it looks professional on the world stage?
Well,
I'm not sure, really.
It's a bit of... I mean, look, it's a bit of fun. I don't think he looks unprofessional. I just think it's fashion. And you know what it's like? As you get a little bit older, you don't like some of the fashion trends.
No, you're not a fan of this one. Casually, I think it looks quite cool, actually, but not in a suit. Not so good. But yours are perfect.
The trouble with this, I've just had a message from one of our bosses, just popped up on my computer saying, I need to see your legs.
Well, you can't, because they're perfectly covered in his suit trousers.
Thank you. I
can just see a peak of an alien sock.
Because you could, which I think we put on Twitter. Which alien socks? Oh yeah, these ones.
You've got little green men on your socks
Yoda.
today.
Yeah, baby Yoda on the socks. So there you go. They were a gift.
He's always got funky socks on. That's a secret, I can tell you.
There you go. Now, away from that to something much, much, much more serious. Donald Trump is facing charges relating to attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Yes, the 4 counts include conspiracy to defraud the US and witness tampering, and it follows an inquiry into the January the 6th riots.
Well, the indictment comes from Special Counsel Jack Smith, who said the uprising, which saw, of course, the storming of the US Capitol building, was an unprecedented assault on democracy.
But in a statement, the Trump campaign said the charges were ridiculous and accused President Biden of election interference.
Well, let's talk to Professor of US and International Politics at University College Dublin, Professor Scott Lucas, who joins us now. Really good to see you, as always, Scott. I mean, look, is it fair to say, as our guests have said this morning, that this is just, you know, an unprecedented and actually very poorly hidden political witch hunt?
Well, I know the Trump camp will come out and use that attack line witch hunt, including with you folks. They did it with the first set of indictments over Trump's falsification of business records back in April. They did it with the indictments in June about Trump's mishandling of classified documents. They'll do it again today because they don't want people to stick with the facts and with the legal case. They'll want to play politics with you. So let's deal with the facts, shall we? What the 45-page indictment sets out with the evidence is the claim, which will have to be proven in trial, that Donald Trump and an inner circle of co-conspirators, 6 of them, 5 of whom we can identify if we read the indictment closely, they tried to overturn the 2020 election, first by spreading knowingly false claims about the election, electoral fraud. Secondly, they then tried to pressure state legislatures and state governors to overturn the election and install fake electors. In other words, Trump's representatives instead of the legally elected ones for Joe Biden. When that failed, they tried to get the Justice Department to overturn the 2020 election, again, without any evidence. And then finally, when all of those efforts failed, they tried to get Vice President Mike Pence on January 6, 2021, to intervene in the congressional certification of Joe Biden, to throw out Biden's electors and to put the fake electors in. When Mike Pence refused to do so, that's when Trump called out his supporters to march on the Capitol.
But the issue, I mean, you started off by saying they knowingly made false claims about the election being rigged. Well, I mean, he's perfectly entitled to do that. I mean, it says so in the document.
You're entitled to make statements about the election. You can say, no, I won. The key thing here is that Trump not only claimed incorrectly that there was massive electoral fraud. There wasn't, but that he knew that he was making claims that weren't true. And the prosecutors are basing that on sources from inside Trump's camp who actually heard the statements being made. In some cases, the statements were made to them. And indeed, I think it's important to note that one of the people who did testify to the prosecutors and whose information was used, I suspect, for the indictment was Vice President Mike Pence.
We've got the document in front of us here, the whole 45-page indictment. I mean, it doesn't add much that is new to us, but when you see it assembled like this, it is pretty devastating reading. How will Donald Trump be feeling now? Are we expecting him to come out fighting?
You know, Ellie, you've hit the nail on the head, and that is that although a lot of this was, you know, we found out about it, I've been analyzing it probably for over a year. The fact of the matter is that it's connecting the dots, putting it all together. And then what will happen is the attempt to basically bury this by the Trump camp in the next couple of days. On Thursday, Donald Trump will be arraigned on charges in Washington in a federal court. If it follows the pattern of the previous two indictments, he will plead not guilty. He won't say anything at the courthouse, but he'll then have a rally of his chosen supporters that night to put out, again, the attack lines that we've heard about, that the judge, the prosecutors, the grand jury, Joe Biden, Democrats, lefties, professors like me, they're all out to get him. And the key thing for us as analysts and in the media is to separate the white noise, some would say the dark noise, from sticking with the facts and letting the legal process play out where he is innocent until established as guilty in a trial, which will likely take place next year.
The problem with all of this, though, Scott, in terms of how it affects Americans, and indeed how views are being established over here as well, is that it has become so tribal. People either think this is absolutely right. I mean, one message this morning said, Trump is a lunatic. And yet other people just absolutely back him 100%. It's almost like a bit of a cult now. So how do you have a sensible argument? How do you even have a fair trial when everyone is so absolutely polarised on him?
We chat like we're doing now, which is on the basis of the facts. And most importantly, we recognize that when the system operates, when the legal system operates, it should not, it must not be tribal. It must not be made tribal by those from the Trump camp who will try to bury the process, or from those who will just make allegations about Trump without referring to the facts. Now, if we stick to the legal facts in this indictment as they are set out, these are very serious charges. These are serious charges which are backed up with evidence. And anytime that this is addressed, as Special Counsel Jack Smith said yesterday, it should be on the basis of the evidence rather than on someone trying to politically spin this. Here, this is why this is important. On January 6, 2021, there was an attempt not just to undermine the American system, but to topple it. There was an attack on the center of our system, the U.S. Capitol. That came minutes after Donald Trump called on people to march on that Capitol to block the certification of Joe Biden. This is the most serious challenge for the American system probably since 1865, not just because of Donald Trump, but of the question, do facts, decency, the legal process, and tolerance prevail, or can you tear it all apart by just shouting on Twitter or Truth Social, or, I'm afraid, on certain TV channels?
Professor Scott Lucas, always really, really good to see you. Thank you so much for your analysis this morning.
Now, you see, look, that to me is common sense, right? It's a really sensible approach from Professor Lucas, because actually, whether you agree with him or not, the one thing he emphasised there was, well, you are innocent until proven guilty. This has to be looked at on the facts, and not... Everything is politicised around this, and that is problematic. And I think we see it increasingly in this country as well, not when it comes to criminal cases. But, you know, everything becomes so politicised, every issue is so politicised, rather than actually looking at the individual rights, wrongs, morals, purposes of policies.
I mean, you can even see it in our views. I mean, it really even divides you, viewers here in the United Kingdom. Adrian from Sheffield. First, Trump is 100% innocent. Jack Smith is trying to make the Constitution a criminal offence.
And Linda says, Nothing, you see, and this, it worries me. It does worry me. She says, nothing will ever convince me that Biden won in 2020. Well, that's in effect saying, well, I don't care about the facts. Don't care about the facts. And you've got to, you know, whoever party you vote for at the next general election, you may lose, you know. But that doesn't mean you can't say, well, this is not my government. This government, this party did not win because I didn't vote for them. It's not how it works, is it? You've got to go, well, OK. And it's a bit like the Brexit campaign, isn't it? Let's look at Brexit.
Yeah.
You know...
even if you don't agree, you've got to respect
democracy,
got to say, yeah,
even if you were a Remainer, but you have to say, well, actually, Brexit won on this one. Might not be very happy about it. And, of course, they tried to overturn that, didn't they? And there's been all the hoo-ha ever since. And a lot of you not happy about that. So you just got to... You know, they've done the checks and balances. It was not a rigged election. That's what all the authorities are saying. So you've just got to move on, haven't you? Anyway.
Well, do keep your views coming in on that or any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Well, to politics over here, then. The Prime Minister has vowed to stop housing illegal migrants in hotels as the Home Office hints that asylum seekers won't be moved onto a barge off the coast of Dorset until next week at the earliest.
Well, speaking to our economics editor, Liam Halligan, Rishi Sunak said the current system of migrant housing isn't fair.
What's going on currently is completely wrong. We've got a situation which is unfair. British taxpayers are forking out £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in hotels and other accommodation. That's clearly wrong. It's clearly unfair, and that's why I want to put an end to it. Now, in the short term, we're finding alternative sites like the barges that we're bringing in, which are new ways to deal with this problem, which no one else has done, but I've done. But fundamentally, if we want to stop this, we've got to stop people coming here in the first place. And that's why stopping the boats is one of my 5 priorities. That's why we've passed the toughest law that any government has ever passed, which will help us do that.
Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody is in Portland Port, where protests are causing problems for the local industry. Jeff, I mean, the Prime Minister there saying, you know, this barge is one way to solve the problem. Well, only a very small way, and even that's not happening yet. Are we any clearer as to what on earth is going to go on with the Bibby Stockholm?
In a word, Stephen, no. The plot certainly is thickening here. We were expecting around 50 to arrive yesterday morning. There was a welcome party here at the port. Then we found out late 2 nights ago from the Home Office that there was a delay because the barge hadn't been signed off for fire safety concerns. Yesterday there was a flurry of activity on the barge, and welders were coming in, builders were coming in, people were coming in and out, and the Home Office said that very probably they would arrive this morning. Then late last night we were told it was delayed again and that it's probably going to be next week. Now, why these delays are happening is up for debate. The Home Office is saying this is absolutely nothing to do with fire safety. The reason that they are giving for the delay is that, unbelievably, they would never start anything new on a Wednesday. They said operationally they need to sign everything off with their own employees, their own health and safety checks with their employees, rotas, etc., etc. Better to start on a Monday than on a Wednesday when you're so close to the weekend. Nothing to do with fire safety. That's what the Home Office are saying. But The Guardian is reporting that the Fire Service Union has gone to the government, written to the government, and said, look, you cannot put these people on this barge in this condition. They're saying that really the fire safety element is very crucial. The corridors are too narrow for the sheer number of people that are expected to go on board, and also the fire escapes too. There's not enough fire escapes, not enough smoke alarms. So they're saying that's the reason. But then add into the mix the Independent newspaper, which is reporting this morning that the asylum seekers themselves are refusing to get on the barge. They have written numerous letters to the lawyer letters to the Home Office saying they really don't want to come on board when there's this situation. So which of those 3 arguments is right, we really don't know. But what we do know is they're not coming this week.
OK, Jeff, for now, thank you.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. And energy industry leaders are set to gather at Downing Street today for talks with Net Zero Minister Grant Shapps about investment in the sector. Mr. Shapps told us that the Conservatives have made good progress on the issue during their 13 years in government.
Actually, we have about 40% of our electricity last year was generated by renewables and nuclear, up from just 7% when we came to power. So it's not that we've not been doing anything, we've been moving very fast. This is just the latest round of investment into renewables by some of the very biggest energy companies in the land.
The Ministry of Justice is set to release a draft code of practice looking at how police should respond to low-level, first-time offenders. The new guidance could see shoplifters and those in possession of drugs led off from being sent to court if it's their first offence.
And the use of AI in breast cancer screenings is safe and could halve the workload of radiologists. That's according to a new study. Researchers found that computer-aided detection could spot cancer in mammograms at a similar rate to radiologists.
Similar rate to radiologists?
Yes.
If it's not quite as good, then that's bad, isn't it?
But if it's the same as, it could, you know, free up time for radiologists.
It's just the word similar bothers me there.
Well, if it's equal to, I think we're looking good for AI. It's good to hear a good news story about AI as well.
Yeah,
I don't hear many of those, to be fair.
No.
We're talking about trouser length today. It's got you going in the views. It's got you going on the emails. It's all because of Rishi Sunak. And essentially, a menswear guru has come for Rishi Sunak about the length of his trousers, saying they are too short.
Too short.
He says, is he trying to create an illusion of height on the world stage? We're asking this morning, what is the correct length of trousers? And Stephen's got a theory.
I just think he's trying to be trendy because it's what the youth are doing. I don't think he's trying to make himself look taller. He's not a tall man. Who cares?
Who cares?
Don't care.
But you do have the perfect length of trouser.
Well, I always do.
It just touches his shoes, so...
Yes, but the problem with this is I know what you want me to do.
Go demonstrate.
But the problem is I haven't got the right shoes on, because what I do is when I'm working like this and I'm behind a desk, I wear comfortable shoes.
Stop making excuses,
rather than proper shoes.
No,
so
he's making excuses for himself.
I'll be in so much trouble.
No, you'll be fine.
But I will demonstrate the right length.
Yeah, and they are stunning, if I do say so myself, tailored to perfection. Do you get them tailored, or is this just you?
No, these are just off. These are just off the shelf.
Are they?
Yeah.
And you would say just there, just hitting the shoe is perfect.
There you go. You just want it to hit the shoe like that.
I think you look very professional.
I don't know which camera I'm on there. There you go, that one. So there you go. So that's how they should be, Mr. Sunak. And ignore the piccolinos. There you go. Spanish shoes. And look at me, I've got all my wires dangling off the side. You've got to ignore me. This is what we have to do in television.
I feel like we're in a changing room and you're looking in the mirror. We're advising you about whether you should buy this pair of trousers or not.
I want to know why there are all these crosses on the floor. This is what you get in TV.
That's where you should be standing, darling. Stand on that.
This is what you get in TV studios, ladies and gentlemen. There's all marks on the floor. It's meant to tell you things, but nobody knows what they mean.
Well, I think you look very professional.
Thank you.
And it's a perfect length.
It's like me dangly wires and all the rest of it.
And I do think in an office environment, you've got it.
Well, except now my mother will be playing hell because I haven't got proper shoes on, if she's watching.
You let the team down. You let the family down.
Because you've got heels on.
Yeah, I'm a professional, you see.
Heels on. I like comfy shoes.
6-inch heels, and you never see them. But they're here.
No. Anyway, if you like the short trousers, half-mast, we would have called them back in the day, then let us know. I'll tell you who is probably wearing proper trousers.
And who's that?
Ada McGivern.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear. Some clear spells, however, it's a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday. Thursday begins with some sunshine, particularly for northern and western England as well as Wales, but quite quickly the cloud will build and further showers will develop into the day. Western areas initially and then more central and eastern parts later on. It's a cool day on Thursday with temperatures struggling to reach the high teens and low 20s. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
And now, after a vegan influencer dies of starvation, we're going to debate whether it's time to stop encouraging all-plant diets. What do you think? It's coming up next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Da-da-da-da-dum, etc.
That's the whole point. But bomb.
And action.
Read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
You love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 8:27. Now, the Ministry of Justice is set to release a draft code of practice looking at how police should respond to low-level first-time offenders.
Yeah, the new government guidance could see shoplifters, thieves and those in possession of drugs led off from being sent to court if it's their first offence. Let's talk to the Shadow Secretary of State for Women and Equalities, Annalise Dodds, who joins us now in the pouring rain in Westminster. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. Can I ask you, what do we make of this? We've got a huge backlog in the courts. It is a problem. For first-time offenders, should they get this little bit of leniency, do you think?
Well, we think that, for example, community sentences need to be used effectively. But, look, I would say, actually, this represents a huge failure for the Ministry of Justice because, as you said, there's a huge backlog in the courts, but there's also a real shortage of prison places. And actually, Labour's revealed today that using the Ministry of Justice's own figures will actually run out of places by November. Now, the Justice Secretary has actually written to judges and said, not just for crimes that aren't serious, but for serious crimes, so for example, for drug dealers, for people who've committed assaults, that actually judges should bear in mind prison overcrowding when they're setting sentences. Now, we believe that's wrong. We believe that the government needs to get a grip on this. They've allocated £4 billion almost to actually be building new prison spaces, but they've only got £1.3 billion spent so far. So Labour would get a grip on this. We would make sure that we had adequate prison spaces for the number of criminals, and of course we'd be driving down crime as well.
I wanted to talk to you about oil and gas and net zero because Labour aren't going to revoke the new wave of oil and gas licences, Rishi Sunak's new wave of them, but that is despite the Labour Party previously saying that you oppose them. So can you just outline Labour's position on that, because it does seem quite confused?
Well, actually, it's perfectly crystal clear. We've said we will not grant new licences. We do not believe the government should be granting new licences. Now, where licences have already been created, where that legal relationship has already begun, Labour will stick to those agreements. Why? Because actually our economic trustworthiness as a country and sticking with legal commitments is incredibly important. And actually, sadly, that reputation has been really dragged through the mud by recent Conservative administrations where they've not held to international law. You know, they've actually threatened our reputation economically for holding to those economic institutions. So where licences have already been agreed, we will not go back on those. That is important legally to provide certainty, but we will not be granting new licences. And that's because granting new licences right now is going to keep people's bills high. It's going to prevent us winning that race for new jobs for our country, and it's against our country's economic interest.
Can you see why that is confusing, though? Because you won't grant new licences, but you won't revoke these new licences. So what is the point of opposing them then? Because you are accepting these new licences.
Well, we don't... With respect, I don't think it is confusing. It's about whether we would grant new licences or not. We would not be granting new licences. That's not in the interests of bill payers. It's not in the interests of our economy. But where that legal relationship has already begun, Labour is not going to be damaging that. And as I said, particularly under Liz Truss, but under other Conservative administrations as well, we've seen a huge amount of damage done to our country's economic reputation. I mean, we are concerned that under the Conservatives, we are losing that global race for the technologies of the future. Now is a time when the Conservatives should have the kind of long-term plan that Labour has for driving towards net zero and energy, to get bills down, to get those new jobs in our country, and instead they're going backwards, and really this is terrible for our economic future.
Well, how do you work that one out, in the sense that what we're told, right, what we're told is that this is preserving jobs in Scotland, it's adding an additional 21,000, it's part of the transition to net zero, which everyone accepts we need, but it means we can produce our own oil and gas rather than import it at a higher price, and in fact, with as Grant Shapps tells us, with 4 times the carbon count involved in getting that other oil and gas. Plus, we're still keeping to net zero at 2050, getting £100 billion worth of investment from companies to push towards renewables and sustainables at a meeting today. How is that being economically damaging to the UK?
Well, I would look at the evidence here and what businesses have been saying, not at what Conservative politicians have been saying, because the evidence is really clear. And, you know, people will have seen this themselves with the bills that they've been paying. The fact that we have domestic production of gas, that has not kept our bills low. Why? Because gas prices are determined internationally. So we could be producing enormous amounts more or less and still have the same price because that price is set internationally. And actually for bill payers, they know this because they see what has happened to their bills recently. Now, I think the Conservatives here are just not being open and frank with people. They have been before. So actually Greg Hands, currently the Conservative chairman, he said that it was a fact that the price of gas was set internationally. So they know this is the case. And I think really they're trying to play with smoke and mirrors here. But industry itself, as well as bill payers, is not being fooled. They're not buying this. They know that the future is in renewables. It's in new nuclear, it's in green hydrogen, it's in ensuring that we have those wind power jobs, solar jobs and other jobs in new technologies. They want to see investment in those areas, and they're really frustrated with the Conservative government because they just seem to be really making up a gimmick just about every week rather than getting a grip on the long term, and that's what Labour would do.
Wanted to ask you about the Rutherglen by-election whilst we have you. Do you think Labour can take Margaret Ferrier's seat from the SNP?
I believe that we can. I think at the moment the people of Rutherglen are really being failed by not just one but 2 governments, obviously by the government, Conservative government in Westminster and by the SNP government in Holyrood. And of course they've also had a rule-breaking MP. When I was there a few months ago, certainly there was a lot of support for Labour there. There was a lot of unhappiness about the situation. And I think now the ball is really in the SNP's court. They need to agree to having a by-election so that local people can have their say.
Annalise Dodds, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for standing there in the pouring rain and talking to us. You wouldn't believe it's the 2nd of August, would you?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, is a vegan diet actually dangerous? Well, we asked the question because an influencer who moved to Sri Lanka and switched to, it has to be said, a very restrictive tropical fruit diet has died of starvation and exhaustion.
So, we're asking the question today, can a vegan diet be dangerous to our health, or is this just a one-off case? Well, author and well-being guru Davinia Taylor says we evolved on meat. It's why we are the planet's alpha species. But PETA's spokesperson, Margarita Sankova, says eating meat is linked to cancer, heart disease and diabetes. Well, good morning to you both. Very, very good to see you this morning. Margarita, let's start with you. Why is eating meat a bad thing?
Well, thank you for inviting me here. And obviously today what we're discussing is a very sad case, but it's definitely not an example of a healthy, balanced, nutritionally balanced vegan diet. And we know for sure that there are so many examples of people actually striving on a plant-based diet. Just think of world-leading athletes like Novak Djokovic or Lewis Hamilton, who is the 7-time world champion in Formula One, and he nabbed quite a few world titles while being a vegan. And he is in a perfect health condition. And what we know for sure, there have been so many researchers saying that eating meat, eating dairy, consuming animal products are linked to so many diseases that can be prevented. And I'm speaking about cancer, I'm speaking about diabetes, I'm speaking about heart diseases. So the best thing you can do for your health is to ditch meat products. It's also great for the planet, as you know, you can reduce your carbon footprint by switching to a vegan diet. And of course, it's better for the animals who are killed in slaughterhouses for our food. And anyone who is considering going vegan, of course, they need to do their research, and the key is in balanced diet. And PETA has so many resources. I have here with me this vegan starter kit that has information on vegan nutrition, and you can learn more at peta.org.uk. We have, guides on where to find your protein, what foods to eat, where to get all the nutrients, and there is abundance of information. So it's absolutely possible to stay healthy, and I would even claim it's way healthier to ditch meat and animal products from your diet.
OK, look, Davinia, there is an argument here, isn't there, to say, you may not like the idea of a plant-based diet, but there are plenty of people who are not eating a nutritionally balanced food diet who eat meat as well.
Well, I mean, personally, coming from experience, as soon as I cut out the typical plant-based ingredients, be it soy, grains, corn, and things just like granola, vegetable and seed oil, I lost 4 stone. I came off antidepressants, and I'm lean and healthy, and I have extremely good bone density for a mum of 4 who is 45. And I think basically what's being pushed here is just another avenue for big food to get in our kitchen cupboards, in our kids' diets, and just load them with highly inflammatory, highly processed junk food that's been greenwashed under the guise of veganism and saving the planet. It's just junk food. I mean, there is nothing more bioavailable than beef. And I am totally in agreement with the factory farming. It's horrific. I live in North Lancashire. I'm in a very rainy Clitheroe right now. My farm is round the corner. That's where I get my lamb from. It rains every day here. We've got the best grass in the world. The animals are treated with respect. This is natural selection. And I've got 4 boys. There is not a cat in hell's chance they're going vegan. Not a cat in hell's chance. They have bacon and eggs in the morning. It's all local. And at night they have meat, without shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, well, look, and that's fair enough. And in a sense, we're not having the argument as to what you prefer to do. That's sort of up to the, we can say that's up to the individual, can't we? But the idea of saying vegan food is junk food, well, look, that's not right, is it? I mean, if you're buying vegan processed food, well, it's as junky food as buying processed non-vegan food, isn't it? But if you're actually just...
Correct.
The vegan diet itself isn't junk food.
This is where all these studies about meat being bad for you are just irrelevant, because you cannot literally check the human race over a diet of a period of time, because we just don't stick to anything. When you're looking at meat as something that's cancerous, guaranteed you've had sausage rolls in there, you've had pasta in there, you've had tons of veg oil in there. It's impossible to regulate. It's impossible to quantify. I generally think if we had it around in our diet 200 years ago, it's more than likely not going to cause chronic disease just because of evolution. If you put a dog on a raw diet of meat, all of a sudden you take it off kibble, all of a sudden their chances of cancer go from 65% down to 4%. And this is a domesticated dog. They don't have grains in their diet. The vegan diet is so processed, it's ridiculous. Of course we have bananas, of course we have tangerines in our house, but it's the greenwashing that I'm concerned with. And the soy that comes in from China is all, it's genetically modified, and it's the basis for vegan food.
Margarita?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, vegan food doesn't have to be processed or junks. Like, think of lentils, think of kidney beans, of whole grains, brown rice, sweet potatoes, vegetables.
You have to prepare them and soak them overnight. It's very time-consuming.
They are widely available everywhere. You know that they're widely available everywhere. I was just passing by Wagamama on the way to the studio. Half of their menu has delicious and nutritious vegan options. I mean, speaking about cancerogenic thing, I think it's a really important topic. As you know, the World Health Organization says that red meat and processed meat are cancerogens, and we are talking about the same classification where you would have cigarettes or asbestos. So I would think twice before eating meat, and there is absolutely no need for humans at all. And if you go down to nutrition and if you break it down, you think of cholesterol, of saturated fats, and all these things, they're only found in animal products. And I would recommend anyone watching Game Changers documentary on Netflix, and they interviewed thousands of nutrition experts and leading athletes, and they all agree that ditching meat is the best thing you can do for your health.
Well, we've got to leave it there. Good to see you both this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
If
you
you've
very
got a view on that, let me know. Let us know, I should
let
say.
us know. Yeah.
Sorry, darling. gbviews@gbnews.com. I have to say, I'm not vegan, but I've been a very strict vegetarian for 45 years. And I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
So there you go. I still like my cheese, though.
Yeah, and your bread rolls, yeah. Well, coming up, should teachers have to remain politically impartial in lessons about racism? We'll discuss that and much more in the papers. That's next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 8:46. We're going through the papers this morning with author and businessman Derek Lord and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
And Claire, let's start in the Times, shall we? And Margaret Ferrier's seat.
Yes, so Margaret Ferrier was the SNP MP who rather stupidly travelled to Westminster pending a COVID test. She had symptoms of COVID, therefore she took the test. She went on a public train, came down to Westminster, got the result, spoke in the House of Commons, then got the result, found positive. What did she do then? Travelled up to Scotland again, up to Glasgow on a train, with knowingly she had COVID.
I mean, it is ridiculous.
It's utterly, utterly ridiculous, and more repugnant, in my view, that the SNP rallied round her, actually, and didn't do anything apart from they then subsequently removed the whip from her, and now they've triggered a by-election.
It's taken a long time.
Well, it's only the 4th time ever since these new recall, parliamentary invitations to recall has happened since 2015 when this came in. Now, what this is going to do... Now, the latest polling would suggest that there's not the appetite for Scottish independence that indeed Humza Yousaf thinks there is. And we only need to look at the disastrous paper that he wanted to roll out in terms of immigration for Scotland. All is welcome, he says. You know, we're not racist, we're not incandescent with rage about refugees. Come to Scotland, we're welcoming. Doesn't have the infrastructure, education's falling off the cliff, the NHS guidelines are atrocious, no one's meeting them, and they've got the worst drug deaths in Europe on his watch.
Can't we pick everyone up from the Kent coastline when they arrive and just put them on the train to Edinburgh?
Well, as long as they don't have COVID. Anyway, and obviously you can't forget the fact that Nicola Sturgeon herself is, you know, she resigned. Her husband resigned. Stuart Hardy, and I think his name was the...
I've lost track.
Well, exactly. There's so many. And yet they still are pushing this narrative of independence, independence, independence. And notwithstanding the disastrous GRR bill that they tried to push through, that even Ash Regan now is saying, look, guys, we need to stop. You know, they've got Mary Black, Stuart Hosey all retiring at the next general election. Humza's still saying we're going to use it as a de facto referendum, which is illegal for him to do and they can't do. Come on, stop it, SNP. Let's move over. Let someone else come in and take charge, and it will be Labour.
Well, they're not going to do that voluntarily, are they?
Well, they'll be pushed to the votes, but they're letting their elected individuals down, their electorate down, and it's appalling, and they're getting away with it, Stephen.
Well, if you've got a view on that, gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's, Derek, have a look at the Times, should we? Teachers need to stay politically impartial when it comes to racism. I'm not quite sure where the politics comes into play with racism.
Well, that's what I also thought too, but leave that to one side because I think that is in the margin and so much of this article really is. I mean, it seems to me that the really important thing is always to remember facts. And 82% of this country identify as white, 4% black, 9% Asian. And what on earth is a Conservative government giving directions to schools, 13,000 pupils, on how to teach them racial awareness courses? None of this is actually appropriate. What is appropriate is everything is done really in the home, right and wrong. And differentiation is something to be celebrated. We just have to have a common sense approach to all this, and that's all anybody needs to know.
And whereas that's a fair point in some respects, until you look at families where there might be quite a strong degree of racism in a family, and if these lessons, life lessons, are left entirely at home, then racist families will continue to be racist for generations to come, unless it's taken out of the home and put into a school.
Well, I mean, I think that probably most people nowadays encounter people of different ethnicities and races all the time. And that is now throughout the country. I think that probably racism is a very minor issue in this country, but we behave the whole time as though it's a major issue. I don't believe it is.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that we should trust people to have the best instincts in almost all things.
Claire, we've just got a quick minute to look at the Times front page, and this is some good news about AI and spotting breast
cancer. It is, and, you know, I'm not a great advocate of artificial intelligence. I think it's, you know, there's some sinister goings-on, I think. However, in this case, I think it's good news. What they're saying is AI can help medics spot more breast cancer cases in those women who are being scanned from the ages of 50 to 70. That's the NHS guidelines. The really interesting thing was, and I think it was a really good fundamental test of evidence here. They trained the AI bots, they gave them data that had been used, that had already been collated and already had been found by radiologists. So it wasn't impinging on any woman who presented with a possibility of breast cancer. So it was very, very, very accurate. In terms, it was actually more accurate.
Oh, well, that's the key.
That was the key. And more, I mean, the accuracy was plus or minus 1%, but at least, not minus, at least it was there.
Yeah.
It actually guaranteed more safety than human error.
So what we really now know is that this story is really about the appropriateness of AI.
Do you think so?
Well, it seems to me, I mean, it's actually doing something that's extremely valuable
for a change.
For a change, you know.
But then the other issue, the back issue of that...
It's not always bad.
But the back issue is, if a woman does present and it's clear, and she's cleared of the AI's processing in terms of reading the scans, and then she's found to have cancer, breast cancer, there's a question of accountability. Who will then be accountable for that, you know...
legal challenges.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, but that all comes down to compensation and things like that, doesn't it? Which actually is the thing you should be least worried about.
Indeed.
I would have thought.
Yeah.
Still a question, though.
It's still a question, but, you know, let's get...
And it's the moral maze.
Well, it is a moral maze, but one we're going to have to get to grips with one way or another. We need to leave it there, I'm afraid. Claire Muldoon, Derek Lord.
You're very welcome.
I would
see you.
I would say it's been a pleasure, but, you know, it's been an experience, Derek.
My dear.
Let's say that.
It always is with me.
You're so cheeky.
I know.
You're so cheeky.
He's
A memorable one, though.
Definitely memorable.
I hope your mum did see your shoes.
She will have done. I've been in so much trouble.
I hope so.
Anyway, let's move on swiftly to the weather with Aidan.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by a strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear. Some clear spells, however, it's a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday. Thursday begins with some sunshine, particularly for northern and western England as well as Wales, but quite quickly the cloud will build and further showers will develop into the day. Western areas initially and then more central and eastern parts later on. It's a cool day on Thursday with temperatures struggling to reach the high teens and low 20s. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Do stay with us. We'll have more on those latest charges against Donald Trump.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant would read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 2nd of August. Today, Donald Trump is charged with attempting to overturn the 2020 election. He faces 4 criminal counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and witness tampering.
The Prime Minister has told GB News he will end the use of migrant hotels as the Home Office indicates asylum seekers won't be moved onto a barge off the coast of Dorset until next week.
Net Zero Secretary Grant Shapps will hold talks today with energy industry leaders to talk about investment in the sector, £100 billion. Earlier, he told us the government is making good progress on the issue.
Actually, we have about 40% of our electricity last year was generated by renewables and nuclear, up from just 7% when we came to power. So it's not that we've not been doing anything, we've been moving very fast. This is just the latest round of investment into renewables by some of the very biggest energy companies in the land.
The Ministry of Justice will today publish new guidelines that will see drug possession and shoplifting offenders let off with cautions. The proposal is part of an attempt to ease the record backlog in the courts.
And we'll tell you what's happening weather-wise today with Aidan.
Heavy rain and strong winds. It's not looking very summer-like today. Is there any improvements on the horizon? I'll have the full forecast coming up shortly.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Well, I got you all going on trousers this morning, hashtag Trousergate. It's after Rishi Sunak has been criticised by a menswear guru for his very short trousers. Stephen earlier demonstrated his perfect length of trouser, which just hits his shoes. But you could see a little sneak peek of a Yoda sock. We've also discussed the Yoda socks this morning that Stephen's wearing. Adam's been in touch saying, Stephen, you're taking the mickey out of Rishi's trousers and you, a grown man, is wearing Yoda socks. Yes, love the show.
Can't argue with that, Adam. I think you make a really valid point. There you go. Absolutely fair. Can't say anything about it. Here's a good one, though. Jerry says, spread some jam on your shoes and ask your trousers down to tea. Do you remember that phrase? Apparently, it's about teddy boys in the 50s. Love it. It's very good.
I love that one.
Very good, very good.
This is quite an interesting one. Alan says, re Sunak's short trousers. I always believed that in Eastern countries it was a sign that you were married.
Oh.
So perhaps this is Rishi Sunak letting us all know that he's off the market.
Maybe. But I don't know anything about that at all. If you know anything about that sort of thing, get in touch. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating idea. You never know. I just think he's trying to be trendy.
Yeah.
He's too old to be trendy. In your 40s, Prime Minister.
Is it professional? Keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, our main news today, and Donald Trump is facing charges relating to attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Well, the 4 counts include conspiracy to defraud the United States and witness tampering, and follows an inquiry into the January the 6th riots.
Well, in a statement, the Trump campaign said the charges were ridiculous. Earlier, we spoke to Professor of US Politics, Scott Lucas, who said both sides on this really need to stick to the facts.
When the system operates, when the legal system operates, it must not be tribal. It must not be made tribal by those from the Trump camp who will try to bury the process, or from those who will just make allegations about Trump without referring to the facts.
Well, Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray, joins us now for more. Good morning to you, Freddie. Always really good to see you. So what do you make of this? Because Donald Trump's supporters would say that this is a politically motivated witch hunt. And then you've just heard there from Scott Lucas, who just says, look, this is the indictment, 45 pages of fact.
Well, I mean, I think the first point to make is that this case is muddied by the fact there are various trials of Donald Trump going on, various cases, and Republicans and people who support Donald Trump can rightly say that there is an element of lawfare going on against Donald Trump and that it is politically motivated. If you look at the prosecutors who are conducting these investigations, and this one in particular, Jack Smith, and the people around it, Jack Smith is the special prosecutor, they are Democratic appointees. They are people who've worked with the Democrat Party quite closely for a long time. And therefore, regardless of the facts for now, just consider that as the fact that the people bringing the evidence are not independent legal people. They are Democrats and they do have an agenda. That's not Trumpy talk. That's just the facts. When it comes to the actual case, in my opinion, not that my opinion matters much, but in my opinion, the way Donald Trump behaved after the November 2020 election and the run-up to January 6th was the worst thing he did, politically, morally, etc. However, the facts of the case are that they are trying to claim he has defrauded the US political system. To do that, they need to prove that he did not believe any of the things he was alleging in public. Now, I've read the indictment, and I think the evidence for that is pretty thin. Therefore, I think, although there will be a strong likelihood of a conviction in this case, because the judge is a Democrat, the trial will take place in Washington, D.C., which is 93% Democrat. Therefore, the jury will be very heavily biased against Trump. It's extremely likely. So the likelihood is there will be a conviction, but it could quickly be appealed or maybe even thrown out beforehand by Trump's legal team.
I tell you what strikes me about all of this, and I know it's away from the main issue a little bit, but the huge problem here seems to be that the legal system is politicised.
It's really quite mad, the extent of politicisation of the American justice system. And I think what's extraordinary is how it's taken the very strange political story of Donald Trump to reveal just how nakedly partisan American justice can be.
The timing of all of this could be quite significant next year, Freddie. I mean, we're talking about a trial taking place, coinciding with Donald Trump running to be president again.
Well, yes, indeed, and not just that trial, but other trials too, the trial over classified documents. the trial over hush money payments paid in New York, the trial probably over what he did in Georgia with possible election tampering. So you're going to see a slew of cases going on against Donald Trump. Now, the interesting dynamic politically here is that every time Donald Trump's legal trials burst into the headlines, so far in the last year, we've seen a surge of support for him. Doesn't go the other way. So the interesting question then becomes, why, if the Democrats are doing this on purpose, why are they doing it? Because they seem to want to face Donald Trump. Because the person that they think they have a highest chance of beating the next election with Joe Biden, who's an extremely flawed president, is Trump. So are the Democrats, the conspiracy then, if you want to get into it, is are the Democrats deliberately building up the Trump trial because they know that it leads to support for him?
Which, I mean, I don't know if you would believe that or not, Freddie. I mean, because it starts to get extremely convoluted, doesn't it? And I mean, to put it into context, the allegations here, I mean, they're effectively... I mean, if we're doing it over here, it would be treason, wouldn't it? Or near as damn it.
Well, I mean, sorry, just on whether to buy the conspiracy theories. I do tend to believe in cock-up more than conspiracy, but I do think the timings of this are quite odd. I mean, for instance, the Trump people say that you know, the reason it's come out so suddenly now is because of some allegations that have come out against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden recently. So I think the reason I'm talking about conspiracy theories is I think that in the next year's election, you're going to see both sides accusing each other of being criminal and it not going anywhere, and yet heading towards this election with two very flawed candidates.
But what about the treasonous issue?
Well, I mean, so the allegation is conspiracy to defraud the American Constitution, essentially, conspiracy to defraud the American public. And as I say, I think that depends on whether you can prove legally that Donald Trump knew that he was spreading things that weren't true. As far as I know, Donald Trump has always believed that the election was a fraud. He wasn't just saying that to try and overturn the result. Therefore, it's going to be very hard to prove that he deliberately lied. There is one allegation that he called one of the theories crazy, and yet he went along with it. But did he actually say it? I don't believe he did. So I think on legal grounds, from what I've read of this indictment, of course there will be more to come in the trial, but it looks pretty thin.
Freddie, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. And I said this is where we need to fall back on what Scott Lucas was saying and say you need to look at the facts, you know, and see what comes out in the trial, actually. Because, I mean, there are allegations that some of the things he said to Mike Pence, the vice president, about whether he believed this or not, could be, you know, that evidence has been given and that may come to light and put him in a very bad light. Because then, of course, the conspiracy theories say, well, he's running for the nomination as well. So he'd say anything.
Yeah.
So how do you balance it out?
Very, very difficult, isn't it?
It is.
Do keep your views coming in on that story and any of the stories that we're talking about today, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, the Home Office is drawing up plans to ban cold calling as part of the government's anti-fraud scheme.
Well, it follows a year of scammers targeting vulnerable people to try and get them to hand over their money. Well, let's speak now to Age UK Policy Manager David Southgate. Good morning to you, David. And I'm sure you really welcome the launch of this consultation because scams, well, they can be really sophisticated, can't they? They can be really, really difficult to spot, especially if you get a cold call from someone claiming to be from HMRC or your bank. It's very difficult to know that this is actually a scam. This could be fraud.
Yes, it is. So scams make up the highest proportion of crimes in England and Wales, and they make up around 40% of all reported crimes. And unfortunately, at Age UK, we're well aware that a lot of those scams are facilitated by cold calls. So as you say, this proposal by the government to ban cold calls is really, really welcome. What we need to see now is see the government also invest in the important policing work that needs to be done to also catch the scammers, as at present we do not have enough resources allocated to policing to address it at scale. And we also need to see better support for victims as well, as they often suffer really serious mental health problems as a result of becoming victimised, and there's not enough focus at this point on addressing them. But certainly the cold call ban is a welcome one.
And if it can be implemented, all well and good. Is it the right way forward, though, David, when we know there is actually now plenty of technology available that you can plug into your own phone at home? It's different with mobiles, of course. But you can plug in this technology which will screen calls for you, which actually may be, if nothing else, a very helpful sticking plaster for people who are more vulnerable to this.
Yes, certainly the cold call ban is not a silver bullet on its own. There needs to be a lot more work done. And of course, a lot of fraud is now facilitated over the internet. And there's a lot of questions of how to address that as well. Caller ID is a really useful mechanism for assessing whether you're potentially being scammed. And we know a lot of older people also use their answering machines to filter out those scams as well. So there are multiple ways that you can potentially do it. The cold call ban, if it's successfully implemented, will of course make it much harder for people to get in touch. And the reason that's so important is a lot of the older people that these scammers try and ring, they wouldn't normally get contact with these people in the outside world, and that cold call can be a crucial link for them to get in and potentially defraud them. So it is a useful first step, but it's not a silver bullet, and there's a lot more work to be done here.
So what can people do to try and avoid fraud via cold calls?
Yes, so the main thing to do is if you get an unsolicited call and you feel uncomfortable in particular on that call, the best thing to do is hang up the phone, ring via a trusted number that you already have for the organisation you're trying to get in touch with. Really importantly, some scammers are now able to leave the phone line live even after you've hung up. So what you can do to avoid that situation is try and use a separate phone if possible to ring that trusted number. Ring a friend or family member that you already trust, and then you can speak to them and assess whether you're actually on the phone to a scammer. Or if none of those options are available, at minimum, try and wait 15 minutes between that call and when you ring that trusted number. And that's the easiest way to avoid it. You can, of course, use call blockers as well, so nuisance call blockers. And as I said, many people in our older population also use their answer machine to try and filter out those calls, and they can be quite useful ways of doing that as well.
David, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. I think it is a wicked crime.
Oh, it is.
Because it takes advantage of those people who are actually most vulnerable, aren't quite sure what they should be doing or not. Here's one for you. If someone rings you up and says, whatever they're saying, that they want your bank details or anything else, card details, bank details, personal information, just say no.
Or hang up.
Don't do it. Just do not do it.
Yeah, hang up. Don't need to even say anything.
No.
I don't think. But no, it is awful. Really important issue to talk about as well. So thank you to David Southgate for that. Now, Britain's Newsroom is coming up at 9:30 and Bev Turner and Tom Howard are here to tell us all about it. Good morning, you two.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you know what? Honestly, this blooming barge that has been sitting now in the harbour for days on end, that yesterday there were concerns about fire, today there are concerns about health and safety. I'm beginning to think that these aren't genuine concerns at all. If this barge was good enough for the Germans and the Dutch when they used it, why are we suddenly finding all of these problems? And just how real are these problems? Are these all sort of lawyers delaying tactics? We'll be digging into that story.
And bearing in mind that there were 3,300 illegal asylum seekers in last month alone, and this boat, even when it's docked and moored, will only take 500, you know. We're going to be talking to Ian Duncan-Smith about that as well this morning, asking him what he thinks is going on. And we've got Richard Tyson as well, first thing this morning.
And the chairman of Republican Overseas, Greg Swenson. We'll be talking about, of course, the Trump indictment, what's going to happen tomorrow. Big showdown. Will Trump even turn up in court? Big questions to explore there.
We shall see. We'll see you just before 9:30. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're talking spaceports in the Shetlands.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Now, who wouldn't dream of owning a spaceport? That's what I want to say. Well, our next guest very nearly does own a spaceport on the island of Unst in the Shetlands. How on earth do you go about securing this? Debbie Strang joins us now. Really good to see you this morning. Talk us through, Debbie, because this is the stuff of dreams for me. What is going on? How did you get to this point?
Well, about 15 years ago, my husband and I bought what was the old RAF Saxa Vaughan, intending to turn it into a tourist resort. We were happily doing that, and about 5 years ago, government report actually was looking at all the sites that were suitable for vertical launch. This is for the launch of small satellites. And there in black and white in the report was Saxa Vaughan as the best site in the UK and in fact Europe. And so we thought, right, let's give it a go.
How do you go about sorting it out? Because, I mean, licenses and all the rest of it are one thing, but it actually must be quite expensive just to set it up in the first place.
It is, of course, and you need to draw on the expertise of people from around the world who've done this before. From the States, we brought in consultants and a team of designers to look at this. It is a privately funded spaceport, which is unusual, and so we had to raise the investment for that from shareholders. So we now have over 400 shareholders who are as excited about what we're doing as we are. So yeah, we've had to widen roads. As you can see, this is the that building is the integration hangar, and that's where the payload will be put into the rocket before it's taken out onto one of the 3 launch pads.
Wow, so this is a really, really exciting time for you, and you're actually already at the testing stage with 2 of these rocket companies.
That's right. So we have a number of rocket companies really interested and are already working. So Latitude from France and High Impulse from Germany have been doing rocket testing with us now for a number of months. In fact, High Impulse from Germany are just back in Shetland now for the 2nd year of rocket engine testing. So it is already happening at the moment. No launches yet, but all the preparation and the plans and the construction are continuing.
Fantastic. I'll tell you what, as we've talked to you, and we're now very, very close friends, can we come and we could do a great piece, couldn't we? We could do the show on the day of your first launch. What do you think?
You'd be more than welcome.
Oh.
You know, I think that is something we should definitely do. Look, it's terrific to talk to you, and we look forward to see you again very soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Debbie. You'd love to be.
I would love to
off.
be there, and we could have a launch live on the show.
That'd be great.
Close and personal.
And it would be UK first. It would be very GB News friendly, wouldn't it?
It would be. I think that'd be absolutely smashing.
I think you're onto a winner there. I'll be there as well.
It's sorted.
Write me in.
We're there. We're booking it in. How brilliant is that?
Yeah, and we'll definitely be here as well at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes, we will.
But up next, it's Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Bev. Good morning.
Gosh,
What day is it?
A surprise. Quick. Hello. It's Wednesday. And gosh, Britain's Newsroom today has got so much to talk about. We'll be covering migration, we'll be covering Trump, we'll even be covering a little bit of a scandal on Coronation Street. Stick with us here on Britain's Newsroom.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Persistent rain for many of us this morning and continuing in places this afternoon. Heavy showers replacing the rain in some areas, and all of this accompanied by strong wind gusting around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the exposed southern and southwestern coast. That could cause some impacts, particularly if you're taking part in outdoor activities or camping, for example. Not the kinds of winds you'd expect early August. Now, once the rain clears out of the way, we've got heavy showers, slow-moving thunderstorms across central parts of the UK. Thunderstorm warning in force could cause some problems on the roads, for example. The driest and brightest weather likely towards the northwest by the end of the day, northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Southeast Scotland, northeast England sees the persistent rain continuing into the evening before eventually fizzling out and pushing south into East Anglia by dawn. Elsewhere, a few showers about, but by Thursday, well, a lot of drier and less windy weather starts to appear.